Story 1.
When I discovered my wife's cheating, I crafted a master plan to make her pay for her betrayal. Standing at the window, I observed the car pulling into the driveway, turning right, and disappearing into the street. I questioned why I wasn't more upset, having just witnessed 10 years of my life slip away. Wasn't there supposed to be more than a shrug and a casual acknowledgement that I should go take care of the dripping faucet? Turning towards the kitchen, I mentally replayed the events of the last half hour. Returning from work, I found my wife, Peggy, seated at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine. I sensed something was amiss right away. Firstly, she was home before Maya's departure from her usual schedule of arriving half an hour to an hour after me. Secondly, there was nothing on the stove. Finally, a glass of wine, a rare choice for Peg. No sooner had I entered the room than she asked me to sit down, revealing she had something to say. Grabbing a beer from the refrigerator, I settled across from her. Peg told me she had noticed a disconnection between us in the last 6 months. Uncertain about the cause, she expressed her concern about our drifting apart. Despite attempting to discuss it, all she heard was that we were going through a rough time and things would improve. Peg then informed me of her decision to initiate a break, emphasizing it wasn't about divorce, just a temporary separation. She felt the need for space to reflect on her life and understand the reasons behind our relationship strain, encouraging me to do the same. In response, I tried to downplay the severity of the situation, urging Peg not to view it as that bad. Acknowledging our problems, I emphasized that every marriage faced challenges. I expressed my belief that we couldn't solve these issues by being apart and not communicating. Peg informed me that talking wouldn't resolve our issues, emphasizing that I only perceived one problem in our marriage: the lack of closeness. According to her, my proposed solution was too simplistic, merely involving her getting undressed and allowing me to do as I pleased. Peg asserted that there was more to our problems. We no longer made love or snuggled, and she couldn't explain why, despite still loving me as much as the day we got married. Something was wrong, and she needed space to figure it out. She clarified that she didn't want to throw 10 years of marriage away but believed that time apart might help. Peg had already packed her belongings and planned to stay with her sister until finding her own place, promising to call me weekly to stay in touch. As she prepared to leave, mentioning her commitment to marry, she departed without a goodbye kiss. Her actions spoke volumes, revealing the depth of our situation. It didn't take long for word to spread that Peggy and I had broken up. Most of our friends sympathized and tried their best to cheer me up. Peggy would call me once a week and ask how I was feeling, and I'd say I was doing fine. Then I'd ask how she was feeling, and she'd say she was fine. Then I'd ask her if she was ready to come home, and she'd say not yet. 6 weeks into Peg's absence, unsettling rumors surfaced, hinting at her having a boyfriend. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that it was just like she said it. She just needed some time alone to get her thoughts in order, and then she'd come home. I kept hearing different things, so I decided to check out the rumors. I would find out where Peg was staying, do a little investigation, and put an end to the rumors. But no one could tell me where she was staying. Either couldn't or wouldn't, and I began to sense that something in the situation was extremely suspicious. I dined with my friend Tom, and his wife Tanya shared my concerns, inadvertently revealing that I planned to hire a private investigator to locate Peg and verify the rumors. I observed Tom exchanging a glance with Tanya, and she subtly nodded. Tom advised me to save my money, confirming the accuracy of the rumors but refusing to disclose further details. In response to my inquiry about Peggy leaving me for someone named Adam White, Tom explained that Adam worked with Peggy and she had indeed left me for him. I expressed confusion, questioning why she didn't simply get a divorce instead of opting for separation. Tom countered by highlighting Peg's meticulous planning, suggesting that she had been dating Adam for almost a year and likely had contingency plans in place. According to him, Peg might have organized the separation so she could return home if things didn't work out with Adam. Feeling frustrated with the lack of information from my supposed friends, I stood up, tossed my napkin on the table, and declared that I would walk myself before leaving. On the way home, I pondered what I had just discovered: no closeness with Peg for over a year because she refused to be with me. No closeness for over a year because she rejected my touch. And all the while she pretended everything was fine. I stayed at home, played the good boy, and waited for the unfaithful truth. All my friends knew, yet they let me sit there and wait. The waiting was over. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with the cordless detective agency and provided them with an advance. I informed them of Peg and her boyfriend's workplace, instructing them to gather all possible information. Then I went home and created a list of tasks to end my relationship with Peg. I mentioned that I would wait for the detective report, intending to have the list and be prepared once it was available. After completing the list, I leaned back in my chair and contemplated another issue. I acknowledged that it had been almost months without any closeness due to Peg's rejection, and decided that now that I knew the reason, I wouldn't remain celibate any longer. sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a beer, and planning to end the long dry spell. I recalled Tom's words about Peg's meticulous planning. Knowing her well, I realized she had plans for my reaction and how to use it against me in the divorce. The list I made was useless. She could predict my response. A new list took shape, requiring immediate action and strategies to turn the tables on Peg. The next morning, I went to the bank to deposit my check. While there, I checked the safe Peg and I shared. The register showed Peg regularly checking it weekly. I noticed she was watching me, ready to respond at the first sign that I was onto her. I pondered that for a moment. Afterward, I removed the 5 certificates of deposit from the plastic envelopes, went upstairs, and used the bank's copy machine to duplicate all 5. Subsequently, I placed the copies back in the envelopes within the box. Unless Peg took the discs out of the envelopes to check them, she would never know about the switch. Knowing that Peg was keeping tabs on me, I casually took my passport out of the box and mentioned carelessly to the woman at the bank as she returned the box that I was going to Mexico for a fishing trip. I walked out of the bank with 5 CDs in my pocket. My visits to the bank averaged 2 times a week. During each visit, I cashed in 1 CD, paid an early withdrawal fee, and then stashed the cash when I got home. Lacking faith in credit cards due to their potential pitfalls, I held an American Express card in my name, where the full balance is settled with the bill, along with several gasoline company credit cards and 1 Visa card with a low limit. In contrast, Peg possessed a good half-dozen credit cards in her name, some with high limits. Monthly, I paid the bills, compiled a list of the balances, and set it aside. I compiled a list of desired items, then went online. Over the next 2 weeks, I initiated spending on Peg's credit cards. My intention was to leave her with substantial credit card debt upon my departure. I upgraded my computer, acquired a new Dell with all the accessories, purchased a Remington 700 on eBay, and obtained other items like a digital camera and a modern phone with various features. The house belonged to Peg, inherited from her parents, so I had no legal claim to it. Nevertheless, we used it as collateral for an open line of credit. Timing it right, I could draw from the line before she realized. Previously questioning why, during our trial separation, she left me in her house instead of asking me to leave. I now understood that being in the house implied I was eagerly awaiting her return. I viewed the separation as temporary from her perspective. Subsequently, I closed my K at work, paid the penalty, and saved the money. I leaned back in my chair and awaited the private investigator's report. The only challenge was how to discreetly conclude it without attracting attention. To avoid surveillance, I decided to plan weekend fishing trips. She was aware of my fondness for fishing and the catches I brought home, making it unlikely for her to hire a private investigator to follow me. After all, wasn't I a fool? Hadn't she been playing with my mind for over a year? On a Friday, just before leaving work, I received a call from Tanya, urging me to stop by their place. Despite attempting to decline, she insisted it was crucial, so I agreed to visit. Upon arrival, Tanya welcomed me and led me into the living room, where Tom was seated in a soft armchair. He stood up, extended his hand for a shake, and motioned for me to relax while he fetched a beer. Tom informed me that Tanya needed to talk to me, assuring me that he agreed completely with what she was going to say. After he left for the kitchen, Tanya indicated that I would need some beer. When Tom returned, he handed me a Bud Light, mentioned that he had things to do and wouldn't be back until midnight, and then left through the front door. With the door closing as the signal, Tanya began to speak. She acknowledged that I overheard their conversation the night I ran away from them, expressing regret for any hurt caused. Tanya explained that they genuinely liked me and didn't intend to hurt me. Complicating matters, she revealed that she and Peg were also friends. Tanya admitted they hoped Peg would return home to me, acknowledging my love for her. They had kept quiet, believing that if we were together again, forgiveness and forgetting wouldn't be an issue. Tanya considered this their apology and revealed it was only part of the reason they wanted me to stop by. Knowing my character, Tanya stated that they believed I wouldn't cheat on my wife, comparing it to my aversion to robbing a bank. Then she caught me off guard with a question about the duration since I last had closeness. I observed her attire for the first time: a deep-cut blouse showing ample cleavage, a short skirt, and high heels revealing attractive legs. Despite our friendship, I couldn't help but be physically affected. Remembering Tom's earlier comment, I began to suspect where the conversation was heading. In a subdued tone, I disclosed that it had been a year and a half. Tanya leaned toward me, and as she hoarsely expressed her desire to change that, I couldn't help but notice her provocative attire. I explained to Tanya that I couldn't proceed with the suggested arrangement, considering Tom's friendship. As I attempted to stand up, she firmly grabbed my arm and pulled me back down. Tanya reassured me that Tom was aware of the situation and had left to provide us with privacy. She clarified that it wasn't a pity or mercy gesture, but rather a decision they had been discussing for months. Tanya explained that Tom was infertile and they wanted a baby, expressing the hope that I could help them while they assisted me. Stunned, I sat there in a daze trying to comprehend her proposal. When I finally found my voice, I expressed confusion, questioning why they had chosen me. Tanya emphasized their desire for a known donor who would be involved in the child's life, suggesting that I would play the role of the godfather, always there for the baby like an uncle. I struggled to grasp the logic of her proposition, but Tanya insisted that they had thought it through. She presented scenarios where I might be needed, either for emotional support or even as a potential organ donor in critical situations. Tanya asserted that they wanted me to be part of their family. Despite my reservations, she shifted the conversation, questioning whether I found her attractive. Tanya squeezed the lump in my pants, interpreting it as a positive reaction. She then knelt down, unzipped my pants, and explained the advantages of being the father of her child, highlighting the need for frequent lovemaking to ensure pregnancy. Tanya assured me that she wouldn't limit our encounters to her most fertile days, and suggested that we proceed to the bedroom for what she referred to as serious procreation. After kissing Tanya once more, I prepared to leave. As she escorted me to the door, she expressed gratitude for what had just transpired. Tanya mentioned her desire to continue such encounters daily until she became pregnant. However, she acknowledged that Tom was accustomed to more frequent closeness, about 3 or 4 times a week. Despite Tom being fine with us seeing each other, she didn't want to offend him. Tanya requested that I call her the next day to make plans for the future. All the way home, I thought about what had just happened. And as I pulled into the driveway, it occurred to me that if Peg was watching me, she would find out about my visits to Tom and Tanya, and notice that Tom had left and I had stayed a few more hours. The next morning, I called Tanya and explained my thoughts to her, but she told me not to worry because Tom had not left. He had gone down to his basement workshop and stayed there until I left. This information got me thinking it was one thing to make love to Tanya when Tom was gone, but could I do it if I knew he was in the house? Tanya must have known what I was thinking because she said, "Don't worry, Rob, everything will be fine. I promise." That same day, I got a call from Tom, inviting me to have a drink with him after work. It was a bit awkward sitting down with a guy you've known for 20 years who's a good friend, and whose wife you just had a consensual night with. He must have known what I was thinking, so he got right to the point. Tom acknowledged the awkwardness of the situation and expressed the need to discuss it. He affirmed his complete agreement with what had transpired between Tanya and me. Tom disclosed that Tanya hadn't revealed the full truth and admitted that he was impotent, unable to engage in intimate activity for over a year. He explained that Tanya's passionate behavior the previous night was an attempt to compensate for his inability, and her concern for not wanting to hurt him was a cover for the truth. Tom contrasted Tanya's consideration for his feelings with Peg's selfishness, noting how Tanya put him first even in challenging circumstances. Tom shared that Tanya's sensuality was a challenge for him, and despite her efforts to cope, she was inevitably going to seek satisfaction elsewhere. He understood her love for him but recognized the impossibility of maintaining their relationship if she were to cheat behind his back. Tom revealed the dilemma he faced. While he could comprehend the reasons for potential infidelity, he couldn't tolerate the dishonesty that would come with it. Tom said that the only solution, as far as he could see, was to handle it openly. However, Tanya wasn't the type to agree to take a lover openly while he sat in the living room. She could probably do it with a stranger in a motel room, but not with him around. They needed someone steady, someone they both loved and felt comfortable with. After considering various candidates and not reaching an agreement, they kept coming back to me. There was concern that if they started with me and Peg came back, it would stop and they would have to start over. Tom expressed confidence that Peg would eventually return, given that everyone who knew Adam White considered him an unpleasant person. He believed Peg would realize that soon enough and come back to me, convinced that I was oblivious to her actions. I chuckled because Tom seemed to understand me well. The prolonged separation made me sense that something was wrong, and now I knew it. According to Tom, Peg was history, even if she didn't know it yet. He was confident that I wouldn't take her back under any circumstances, freeing Tanya and him to approach me. They wanted to have a baby, and Tanya needed a physical relationship until doctors could identify and resolve Tom's issue. They needed someone else to fulfill that role for Tanya. Tom acknowledged that it might sound peculiar, but he believed that me being intimate with his wife would, in fact, save his marriage. He wanted me to get used to the idea that he knew about it and there was nothing wrong with him. I was left speechless, finding the situation so unusual that it was difficult to comprehend. Tom, after staring into his glass, turned his gaze to me and expressed his emotional struggle, sharing that the inability to satisfy his wife was deeply painful for him. He emphasized the devastating impact it would have on him if he were to lose her and earnestly asked for my assistance, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation. After a brief pause, I nodded in agreement. On Sunday, I invited Tom, Tanya, and 3 other couples over for a barbecue. When the other couples left, Tom went into the study and played on my computer, while Tanya and I went upstairs to my bedroom. By the time I had undressed, Tanya was lying on the bed with her legs spread wide and begging me to hurry up. After spending an hour together, Tanya glanced at me and commented that Peg had managed to escape consequences for her actions, expressing her disbelief, and suggesting that Peg must be either crazy or stupid. I could sense that Tom understood Tanya's sensuality. Before parting ways, Tanya reluctantly distanced herself from me a 3rd time. I then accompanied both Tanya and Tom to the car, where Tom shook my hand and Tanya kissed me on the cheek. We all concurred that the day had been a success and discussed the possibility of repeating the experience soon. To an outsider, our conversation would have appeared to be about a barbecue. Monday afternoon, I met with John Abbott of the Cordless Agency. Handing me the report, he said, "Every time I do one of these things, I hope it's just a misunderstanding and that nothing is going on. But there's no doubt about it here. Your fee also covers our appearance in court on your behalf if what you decide to do goes to trial." I shook his hand, walked out of his office, and on the way home, I wasn't at all as pissed off as I thought I would, but probably because I had already accepted that it was true, and by the time I got the report, I had it all sorted out in my mind. What am I going to do about this situation? Nothing that I hadn't already done. The only thing I had to do was to get the line of credit in place in time so that Peg wouldn't find out about it until it was too late. I'll meet with a lawyer and get the paperwork done, but I won't file it until I'm ready. For the next 5 weeks, we met with Tom and Tanya 3 or 4 times a week, either at their place or mine. They started a rumor that I was going through a rough patch and that they were spending time with me, trying to cheer me up. Peg called me every week, but I stopped asking how she was feeling and when she was coming home. Finally, I'd had enough. I wrote checks on the line of credit, and as soon as they ran out, I found an apartment, moved out of the house, and served Peg with divorce papers. Instead of citing infidelity, I listed irreconcilable differences. I did this so that Peg wouldn't know I knew about White. She'd see it as my way of encouraging her to decide to come home. She'd call me, write some nonsense about me overreacting, and then probably suggest we meet somewhere for drinks and dinner, where she'd try to calm me down and talk some sense into me. I'd agree to meet her, listen to her, and then tell her I'd think about it. That would give me a few days to clear my line of credit and empty my checking and savings accounts. It went exactly as I had envisioned. First, she called me and told me I was being unreasonable, that there was no need to get lawyers involved. I told her I was tired of the neither fish nor fowl situation. You don't want to be with me, so it's time for me to accept that and move on. I agreed to meet her at Angelo's. It was the first time I'd seen her since she left me, and she looked good. I would miss her. Thunder strike me, I really would, because it was obvious to me that I still loved her. But even if she came back to me, I knew I could never live with her again. I didn't tell her that, though. Instead, I sat there and listened to her feed me a line about how she'd been seeing a shrink and that the shrink was helping her understand. Blah, blah, blah. Peg was making good progress, and all she needed was a little more time. I know this is hard for you, baby, but it's hard for me, too. Please, baby, just give me a little more time. I said I would think about it and let her know. I waited 2 days and then called my attorney, told him it was time to move on to step 2. He canceled the divorce papers and sent Peg a notice that the filing was canceled. Peg called me from work, thanked me, and told me I wouldn't regret it. I smiled, knowing I wouldn't regret it, but she didn't know why. She would find out soon enough. That night, I joined Tom and Tanya for dinner. After the meal, Tanya and I retired to her bedroom, where she spread a blanket and expressed a desire to make love instead of just having closeness. She revealed that a home pregnancy test on Tuesday and a doctor's confirmation that afternoon confirmed she was pregnant and that I was going to be a father. Although our encounter was brief that night, it was a slow and enjoyable session. Afterward, I informed Tanya that I might not see her again soon, as I planned to conclude the situation with Peg and White that week, possibly requiring me to leave town for a while. Tanya urged me not to take any drastic actions, emphasizing the need for the baby's father to be around. Concerned, she speculated that my decision might be influenced by Tom's situation, and she urged me to think about it differently. Despite our recent closeness, she emphasized that just because she got what she wanted didn't mean she didn't still need me. The next day, Adam White, a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles, attended the meeting and left in good spirits after discussing potential opportunities for advancement within the organization with influential members. In an equally good mood, he got out of the car in the parking lot of his house. He locked the car door, turned around, and felt a blinding pain before everything around him went black. He was found by a neighbor who called paramedics, and the paramedics who responded to the call took him to the emergency room at the hospital, where it was discovered that both of his arms and both of his legs were broken. and his genitals were damaged so severely that both of his testicles had to be removed. He was in great pain when he opened his eyes and saw that he was in a hospital room and found that he could not move. He had plaster casts on his arms and legs and was in traction. He saw Peggy standing next to his bed with a look of horror on her face before he passed out again. I wasn't present, but I received a detailed account of the events. A man entered the room, approached Peg, who stood near the bed, and glanced at White. The man inquired if she was Margaret Olson, and upon her affirmative response, he handed her legal documents informing her that she had been served. Opening the envelope, Peg discovered that she was being sued for divorce, citing infidelity as the grounds. As she read the word infidelity and observed the state of White on the bed in front of her, her face turned pale and fear overcame her expression. Realizing the implications, she exclaimed, "Oh my God," before sitting down in a chair and breaking into tears. The police inquired about my whereabouts that night. It transpired that I was engaged in a poker game, commencing an hour before the Eagles meeting and extending for an additional hour after White entered the hospital. Peg inadvertently provided an alibi, funding it without awareness. While the guys were willing to assist for free, I utilized Peg's credit as a gesture of gratitude. The Home Shopping Network obtained her Visa card number for the digital cameras gifted to Bill and Steve. eBay utilized her MasterCard for the laptop given to Mike, the 19-inch flat panel monitor for Phil, and even covered the cost of the aluminum baseball bat. I embarked on a 2-month vacation once the police were convinced of my innocence and White's misfortune. I ventured to Mexico for a fishing trip. Before departing, I instructed my lawyer not to press for a divorce, maintaining the status quo. I intended to stay married, yet distance myself from Peg unless she resisted. Weekly calls to Tom and Tanya revealed Peg's return home. True love seemed absent in Peg and White's equation, as she never reconciled with him after being served next to his hospital bed. With credit card bills arriving, Peg discovered empty savings and checking accounts, a tied-up line of credit, and fake CDs in the safe deposit box. Desperate to find me, she learned from my boss, who led her to believe I left abruptly without notice. Upon demanding an appointment with my attorney, Peg discovered I had severed Tice. The divorce proceedings settled his fees, and he no longer represented me. Peg had no alternative. 4 months post my fishing departure, she declared bankruptcy, losing her house and trading her Lexus for a used Geo. Upon my return from Mexico, I rented an apartment across town, avoiding places where she might spot me. Tanya, now 5 months pregnant and even more alluring, and I resumed our relationship without concerns about being observed. 2 or 3 times a week, we spent nights at each other's places. Peg found out about my return 2 months later, and one day, waiting for me in the parking lot after work. Ignoring her, I drove away, and she followed. Eventually, I pulled into Bud's Grill Bar parking lot, intending to talk to her away from my workplace. Already at the bar ordering a Bud Light, I observed her entering, scanning the surroundings before spotting me and making her way over while mumbling something. When she reached me, I anticipated her actions. Turning on the stool, catching her hand and squeezing it firmly, I warned her not to provoke me too much, expressing my readiness to cause her pain. After releasing her wrist, I clarified that I wasn't running away but moving slowly and carefully to ensure she could follow me. I emphasized that discussing her actions in the parking lot where I worked was inappropriate, as everyone there already knew about her behavior. I expressed my desire to talk to her. Peg insisted she didn't want to talk, demanding her money back. I questioned her about the money, asserting that she owed me for the house and that half of everything else was rightfully mine. I refused to give it to her, justifying my stance as compensation for the pain, suffering, and loss of marital rights I endured. I recounted the 1.5 years of abstinence while she was involved with someone else, highlighting the humiliation I faced as people viewed me as a deceived husband. I accused her of making me lose my parents' house, expressing frustration and resentment. I confronted Peg, expressing skepticism about the significance of the shared assets given her decision to live with another man. When she demanded money, I firmly rejected her request, asserting that she had attempted to manipulate me, got caught, and faced the consequences. I informed her that the court would determine the division of property, but she wouldn't receive any money from me. I outlined a strategy for the legal proceedings, explaining that once she sued, I would counter-sue. I emphasized the ability of a skilled lawyer to prolong the case for 6 to 8 months, during which she would be paying her attorney. I questioned her financial ability to sustain legal fees without gaining anything. I claimed to possess sufficient evidence to defend my case in court, warning her that if I won, she would suffer the consequences. In a worst-case scenario for me, I described a scenario where I would agree to divide the assets, but subsequently evade payment. I highlighted the impracticality of retrieving money from me, as I had no savings or checking accounts, a leased car, and lived in a furnished apartment. I underscored that the only recourse Peg and her lawyer would have with a judgment was to garnish my paycheck. However, I warned that if my paycheck was garnished, I would lose my job, leaving her with minimal financial gain after spending years on attorney fees. All that's left is to return to the judge and face the possibility of jail for contempt of court if I refuse to comply, I informed Peg. You can expect only a postcard from a small fishing village in Mexico, where I would reside until my funds ran out. I acknowledged that, thanks to her, I now had something else. I urged Peg to come to terms with the fact that she had manipulated me, been caught, and faced retaliation. I suggested she consider herself fortunate, especially when reflecting on the fate of her boyfriend. I emphasized that she could still be intimate with anyone, unlike her boyfriend, who had lost his masculinity and could never be with another man's wife. When Peg accused me of having a hand in what happened to Adam, I pointed out the difference between perception and proof. I questioned her about the progress of her novel, noting that she hadn't seen Adam since the first day he was in the hospital. In response to her assertion that I took away the only thing he had, I sarcastically acknowledged his well-endowed nature and prowess as a lover. I suggested that if I had known she would eventually come back to me, the entire situation could have been avoided. I ended the conversation with a tone of regret, musing about the potential for a more joyful life if we had communicated better. Peg responded with irritation, labeling me a prick, to which I retorted that she was a worthless phony. I finished my beer, stood up saying, "Bless you," and walked out of the bar. 3 days later, I received divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I made no objection, and she received half of the marital assets with an order for me to repay the borrowed money. I wished her luck and discarded the final decree. She must have believed my predictions because I never heard from her again. One interesting outcome emerged from this chaos. Everyone agreed White was a prick. Even pricks can have a friend or two, and one of them was Peg's boss. He disliked how she treated White after his misfortune, so he let her go. Well, not exactly fired. The recession necessitated downsizing, and Peggy was downsized, though everyone knew she was fired. Unable to find work locally, she moved to California where she had relatives. No one, not even her sister, has heard from her since. Plus, there is one more chapter to this story. It was a sad ending, but at the same time a glorious beginning. Tanya gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and Tom adored and spoiled her. Uncle Rob became a regular visitor, spending countless hours with little Martha. Tom never revealed the full story to Tanya and me. He knew the cause of his erectile dysfunction but kept it hidden, even from Tanya. Cancer went untreated and spread. After his funeral, Tanya handed me an envelope. On it was written, "For Rob only." I looked at her and she shrugged, saying, "I have no idea. It's addressed to you, so I don't know what's inside." I opened it and read, "Hey buddy, if you're reading this, I'm leaving. There was a reason I chose Yui's. It was me, not Tenyato, be the father of our child. I knew I wouldn't be there for them, and I wanted someone I could trust to watch over them. I knew I could count on you. Don't let me down, brother. Take care of our girls." I held out the letter to Tanya, and she read it and cried. I hugged her for comfort, and she asked me what I was going to do. I would do exactly what he suggested, take care of my girls. 6 months later, Tanya...
Story 2.
I caught my wife cheating with my son's best friend, and then karma took care of them. I've been married for 23 years to what I've always seen as my ideal partner. She's incredibly beautiful, smart, and outgoing, with a kind heart. I'm 57, and she's 55. While our personalities differ, they complement each other. I'm more introverted, rational, and somewhat intellectual, while she's extroverted, intuitive, and empathetic. We share many interests and love doing the same things. We've traveled extensively and have 3 children, 2 girls and 1 unexpected but cherished boy, who's now 15. Our oldest is 20, a sophomore in college about 150 miles from home. We've been fortunate and enjoy the perk of going on extended vacations as a family every 5 months or so, often exploring new places, especially islands and beachfront destinations. We're all in good shape, and our children bring us a lot of joy. Sometimes we even invite family and friends, covering their flight and accommodation costs. Life has been great. I was married before, for 4 years, but it wasn't a good match. I was young, immature, and emotionally dependent back then. Looking back, I suspect my ex-wife might have had a personality disorder, and our later years together were a nightmare. She asked for a divorce, for reasons I couldn't understand at the time. Now I realize she had an emotional or physical affair. I was clueless then, reacted poorly, and was devastated initially, but eventually, I reached a breaking point and just wanted the pain to stop. The divorce was quick but bitter due to financial disputes. I was relieved when it was over and have no regrets about it. Career-wise, I had a successful run, holding senior positions for a global company at a young age. However, due to a rare disease causing hearing loss, I had to leave my career. Financially, we're stable, living off my savings and investments. I've saved and invested wisely over the years. I have the freedom to work on my investments, but I do miss collaborating with others and leading a professional team to build something bigger. In my career, I thought our marriage was fine. I guess we moved from young love to a more mature and stable relationship. We have help so we can go out together whenever we want, both as a couple and as a family. My hearing loss has been tough on us. It's frustrating because I can't join many group conversations anymore. I miss it, and I've become more introverted. Working alone doesn't help either. Dealing with my hearing loss has made me seem distant at times, which frustrates both my wife and me. She has to repeat things to me, and I can get annoyed more easily. It's frustrating when my strong cognitive abilities are hindered by not being able to hear or participate in group conversations. I've spent weeks or even months feeling like a bystander. I have a shorter temper and less patience in conversation because I often miss things. In long discussions, I like to get to the point to hear everything. I'm sure this can make me seem abrupt. So, why am I here? I started suspecting something about 3 months ago, and it has been bothering me since then. I was hasty and anxious, so I didn't wait for more evidence before confronting my wife. This suspicion has grown like a virus, going from a quiet doubt to a loud question. Is my wife gaslighting me about her affair? I have this persistent feeling that my wife is attracted to my son's 21-year-old best friend. It all started around 3 months before August 2019. We were preparing for a vacation with our 3 children, and my son was back home from school. It was a trip we had planned a few months earlier. Usually my wife takes charge of planning our vacation destinations because she loves traveling, and I enjoy seeing her excitement build up in the weeks leading to our trips. We've always had an active social life, mainly with a specific group of friends, most of whom we both know, and nearly all of them are married. My wife often goes out for dinner with her married friends once or twice a week, either at a restaurant or someone's house. She tends to fill her schedule to the brim and has difficulty turning down invitations. Typically, we coordinate our plans with family and friends early on. So it struck me as odd when I overheard my wife on the phone in the kitchen, not coordinating schedules but actively convincing someone to join us on a trip. I couldn't hear very well, but it sounded like she was saying things like, "It will be so much fun, just like last time. We can go on a boat ride, walk on the beach, snorkel, and more." It was almost like she was trying to persuade a child with candy. When she realized I was behind her, she got startled, almost dropping the phone. She clutched her chest as if I had given her a heart attack and then quickly pretended like nothing had happened. I gave her a puzzled look, wondering what had just occurred. She walked into the pantry, then returned to the kitchen, seemingly to compose herself. She asked me what I wanted for dinner, a question she had already asked a few hours earlier, which struck me as odd. I repeated my dinner choice, then left the kitchen to join my kids in the living room, where we were watching TV. A few minutes later, I was sitting at the dining table with my wife and kids, having dinner and discussing school, friends, and other topics. That's when my wife mentioned that my son's friend, let's call him Jason, had texted her, expressing interest in joining us on our upcoming vacation. This immediately caught my son's attention, and he clarified that he hadn't told Jason about our vacation because he intended to invite his girlfriend. However, my son mentioned that Jason had also texted him a few minutes ago, expressing his desire to join us on the trip. My son wanted to check with us before responding to his friend, but appreciated my wife bringing it up earlier. My son had informed us that he planned to bring his girlfriend on the trip, so it seemed a bit odd to invite his friend since he would likely be spending most of his time with his new girlfriend. Additionally, I had a suspicion that my wife was not being truthful about the text message because I now believe that Jason might have been the person she was speaking with on the phone, trying to persuade him to join our vacation, yet she was acting as if Jason had initiated the idea. Jason is a good kid, and he became best friends with my son when they were both 14 years old after meeting at a summer camp. Both of his parents are African American and live in a middle-class neighborhood in the inner city. They are hardworking individuals, both employed in a delivery service job. I won't specify to protect their identity. Although my son and Jason attend different schools, Jason's parents invested a lot of money to enroll him in various after-school programs that my son was part of. They also played basketball together, and Jason frequently visited our home to play video games with my son. I had met his mom a couple of times when she dropped him off at our house or picked him up from practice. My wife often volunteered to give him rides and had a fondness for him. This didn't strike me as unusual because Jason was a well-behaved and intelligent young man with a promising future. He graduated from high school before my son and attended a different college, so we hadn't seen him much since then. Given all this background information, I initially thought my wife might have lied to bring Jason closer to us again. as she has a tendency to get involved in helping underprivileged kids, mentoring minorities, participating in progressive activities, and volunteering. I believed this was another one of her efforts. Additionally, I liked Jason because he was remarkably mature for his age and could engage in adult conversations even better than my son. He was good company, so with all these factors in mind, I dismissed my suspicions. 3 days before our vacation, my wife and our 18-year-old daughter went shopping to get some items for the trip. It was a lengthy shopping trip, and they bought things not only for my son, but also some gifts for Jason. Even if I had known about this beforehand, I wouldn't have found it too unusual, because she had a history of buying presents for him when he was younger. The next day, my son's girlfriend arrived in the morning, and later in the evening, Jason also joined us. That evening was a lot of fun. We all went out to eat, with my wife sitting close to me and Jason sitting next to my daughter. However, I couldn't help but notice that my wife kept glancing at Jason throughout our time at the restaurant. Even when I was talking to her, she seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood, which puzzled me at the time. I went along with it because seeing everyone happy made me happy. When we got back home that night, I went to bed, and my wife stayed up late with the kids. I'm not entirely sure, but I think she eventually came to bed around 3 a.m. The next day, as we were getting ready for our trip, I was going through my checklist to ensure I didn't forget anything. I realized that my credit card was missing. After we had packed our bags for the trip, I searched everywhere but couldn't find it. While I was looking through my wife's luggage, because she had used it last, I noticed she had bought one of those revealing open-back bow crotchless bikinis. I found it inappropriate, especially for a mother her age. However, I thought she had bought it as a surprise for me during the trip. The following day, we all took a business-class flight to our vacation destination, which was in the southwest region of Barbados, specifically Carlisle Bay. It was a spectacular and luxurious Caribbean beach and spa resort situated on the southern shore of the island of Antigua. With its stunning white sand beach and tranquil turquoise waters, it truly felt like paradise and was one of the most beautiful resorts in Antigua. On the first day of our vacation, I spent most of my time relaxing on the beach, reading investment articles in the Wall Street Journal. Meanwhile, my family went scuba diving. In the evening, my wife, my son, his girlfriend, and Jason went to a disco bar. I opted to go to a restaurant with my daughter. When my wife and the others returned home about 3 hours after my daughter and me, I noticed my wife was a bit tipsy. She woke me up for intimacy, and it was one of the best experiences we'd had in months. I assumed something had really turned her on during her night out. The following day, I spent most of my time on the beach with my wife. In the evening, she told me she was going to a restaurant with my daughter's son, his girlfriend, and Jason. However, around 10 a.m., when my son returned with his girlfriend and his sister, my wife and Jason were nowhere to be found. I asked them where my wife was, and they said she went out with Jason on a local wildlife tour. That same night, around 1 a.m., I woke up and my wife wasn't beside me. I wanted to enjoy the ocean breeze and wait for her return. As soon as I opened the door leading to the living room, I noticed some quick movement around the couch. The TV was on, and I saw my wife pretending to be lying down on one of the couches, while Jason was on the adjacent one. My wife was wearing a revealing wrap-knot cover-up skirt, and underneath it I remembered the color of the open-back bow crotchless bikini I saw in her luggage. They were both sitting separately but looking awkwardly at the television. Even though the windows were open, the room felt heavy, and I could smell the unmistakable scent of intimacy. My hearing may be deteriorating, but my other senses were highly sensitive at that moment. I suspected Jason had been close with my wife. If I had opened the door more slowly, I believe I would have caught them in the act. I didn't know how to react at that moment. I glanced at both of them for a second, and it was an incredibly awkward situation. They clearly separated as soon as they heard the door open. Jason was only wearing shorts, no shirt, which wasn't too unusual given our suite's proximity to the ocean, but I could clearly see he was trying to hide in hardwood. I returned to the bedroom, and my wife followed me, feigning normalcy. I could sense that there had been closeness, and it seemed like she was trying to convince me that everything was ordinary, like they had simply been watching TV. That night, I didn't bring up anything because I was left without words. I felt an overwhelming sense of self-pity, depression, and loneliness. The combination of my hearing loss and the betrayal made me feel like I was slowly vanishing, as if my wife and family were beginning to overlook me. I was deeply humiliated and filled with shame. I had a restless night, and by the next day I knew I had no concrete evidence. Still, everything, from the moment I overheard her on the phone persuading Jason to join us on vacation to the almost incriminating situation I nearly walked in on, seemed to align. At that point, I strongly suspected my wife was engaged in a physical relationship with my son's friend. I lacked clear evidence, only having circumstantial clues, but it bothered me so much that I felt compelled to confront my wife. That morning, I called her into the room and admitted that I had caught her being close with Jason. I urged her to be honest and asked how long this had been happening. Her reaction was entirely unlike her and very peculiar. She vehemently denied everything and was deeply upset that I would even consider such a thing. She resorted to name-calling, even going so far as to call me deaf and a jerk. Her tactics worked, and she won the argument. I had no evidence, and there was nothing I could do because I lacked solid proof. She even insisted that I wasn't just losing my hearing, but also my sanity. She was resolute and persuasive, raising her voice to the point where I feared my kids might hear her. The thought of my kids discovering my unfounded jealousy toward the young man they had known for over 7 years, thinking he was being close with their mom, would be a disastrous and embarrassing situation. By the end of it all, I found myself in a difficult spot, the one who had to apologize. I felt I should have been more patient, gathered more evidence before confronting her. My emotions got the best of me, even though I'm typically a logical and rational person. I should have taken some time to think things through because I knew she would deny it. The remainder of our vacation was dreadful. My wife treated me with disdain, almost like I was a nuisance. I felt like I had lost some of her respect. However, deep down, I knew what I felt was real. I was convinced she was gaslighting me, and I believed she was being close with Jason on the couch, but I just couldn't prove it. Update: 2 days ago, I confronted my wife about my suspicion that she was having an affair with Jason. As expected, she vehemently denied it. Since then, she's been giving me the silent treatment, and even our kids have noticed, but we've kept it to ourselves. I've also noticed that she stopped spending time alone with Jason and has started doing activities with all of us present. This vacation was supposed to be about me, her, and our 3 children coming together, not driving us apart. Our previous vacations were filled with togetherness, fishing trips, picnics, and more. I couldn't understand why she was so insistent on inviting him this time. It's not like Jason hasn't joined us on vacations before. In fact, when he was 19, we went on a vacation with him. If I recall correctly, I spent most of my time with my wife, but I'm not a night person, so I would go to bed early. On the other hand, she's a night owl, so if there was any affair back then, it would have happened when I was asleep. I can't shake the feeling that this affair has been going on for quite some time. I suspect she took more risks this time because she hasn't seen Jason as often since he's been busy with college. Looking back, I question her frequent late-night dinners with married friends, which happen at least once or twice a week. Interestingly, these gatherings occur more frequently when Jason is on break from college. Our closeness has always been healthy, but I've noticed her libido increasing with age while mine slows down. We still have private moments once a week, and if it were up to her, it might even be more frequent. I can't help but wonder if my reduced intimate activity played a role in all of this. We only have 2 days left before our vacation comes to an end. It seems like everyone is having a good time except for my wife and me. There's this tension between us that I want to resolve tonight. I want to hit the reset button and go back to how things were before I confronted her. I don't want this tension to linger for another day, and I certainly don't want to carry it back home. So I pulled my wife aside and suggested that we have dinner at a secluded restaurant to talk things out, and she agreed. Later in the evening, while the kids were occupied with other activities, I put on a floral shirt and she wore a sundress. The restaurant was about 300 yards away from our resort, so we decided to walk there. We had previously reserved a table facing the ocean, which was a beautiful sight. We sat at a table for 2, and I remained silent for a moment, hoping she would start the conversation. I felt like I made a mistake the first time by revealing what I knew too quickly. This time, I planned to make her feel comfortable, apologize for falsely accusing her, and let her do more of the talking. I intended to pay close attention, waiting for her to slip up. Over the years, I've trusted her completely and given her my all. However, she has betrayed that trust by disrespecting me, engaging in an affair with a man much younger than her son, and lying about it. She tried to guilt and shame me as if I were a fool. I'm the one who brought this family together, and I've worked hard to create the wealth she enjoys. Even the dress she's wearing belongs to me. She seems to think I've reached this point by being naive. I have to admit that I've been consumed by work, and my hearing loss may have distracted me. It's a harsh realization that I put too much trust in my wife and didn't pay enough attention to what she was doing. It's bad enough that she's having an affair, but when it involves my son's friend, someone she was supposed to be mentoring, it hits very close to home. After an awkward silence, my wife was the first to speak. She apologized for not spending as much time with me during this vacation as we usually do. She acknowledged that my suspicions about her and Jason had arisen because of their close friendship. She looked directly into my eyes and stated, "I never slept with him." I simply nodded in response. No words were spoken. She continued, expressing her understanding that I've been distant lately, partly due to my hearing loss and her efforts to reconnect with me. She also apologized for the hurtful things she had said earlier, explaining that anger had led her to speak out of turn. She assured me of her loyalty and commitment to our relationship. Her opening words seemed positive, and I hoped this conversation would lead to a more open and honest dialogue. In turn, I admitted that I hadn't been myself recently and expressed a desire for us to grow closer during the vacation. I carefully avoided mentioning Jason or the affair. We enjoyed a lovely romantic lunch together and returned to the resort holding hands. The remainder of our stay was uneventful, with my wife making efforts to spend time with me. However, it still felt forced, as though she didn't really want to be there. Perhaps it was my mind playing tricks on me, now that I was aware of the affair, and the image of my once pure and loyal wife had been shattered. I felt like I had been blind, but now I could see. After our reconciliation during dinner, the kids no longer suspected anything was amiss. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. That's when I remembered I had installed cameras in our house, covering common areas like the front porch, backyard, both sides of the house, living room, home theater, and game room. The cameras stored footage for 30 days before erasing it. I hoped they might have captured something incriminating that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. I was eager to return home with this potential evidence. I pretended that everything was fine for the rest of our stay. To my wife, it probably felt like a close call. She likely believed I had forgotten all about it, thinking she had successfully manipulated my perception. She acted like the perfect mother and wife, but I couldn't help feeling disgusted because I believed she was comfortable deceiving me. It gave me the impression that she may have engaged in such behavior throughout our relationship. Throughout my life, even in business, honesty and loyalty have been paramount to me. And being lied to or feeling deceived is something I detest. Upon returning from our trip, I was filled with excitement. I didn't want to get my hopes up about finding anything on the cameras because my wife was well aware of their presence. She had actually encouraged me to install them after seeing them at her friend's house. I didn't think she would be careless enough to engage in any suspicious activity within the camera's view. However, I held on to the possibility that she might have slipped up this time. Paranoia consumed me. Because she knew I was on to her, I worried she might rush home to erase the recordings before I had a chance to review them. My wife isn't particularly tech-savvy, so wiping the memory was beyond her capabilities. Still, she might attempt something to compromise the camera's storage and make it impossible for me to retrieve any information. After we disembarked from the plane, I informed my wife that I wasn't feeling well. I acted convincingly sick and asked her to pick up a prescription for me. She usually handles my prescriptions, and even though I was certain I didn't need a refill, I claimed to have forgotten the medication at the resort. I told her that I and the kids would take a different taxi home to let me rest. Jason took a separate taxi to his parents' house. As soon as I arrived home, I downloaded the footage from 2 days before our vacation onto a portable hard drive. These were the days when Jason had visited our home. It took some time to complete the download, but it finished before my wife returned. I closely observed her to see if she checked the camera's storage or did anything to tamper with it, but she acted as though the cameras didn't exist in her world. It took us until midnight to finish unpacking. All I could think about was getting everyone to bed so I could examine the footage. When everyone finally went to sleep, I connected the hard drive to my laptop and began the daunting task of reviewing the recordings. I fast-forwarded to the specific timeline of Jason's visit. On the night he arrived, he stayed in the guest bedroom, accessible through a hallway from the game room. As I fast-forwarded through the footage, I spotted my wife on the game room camera. I hit play at normal speed, and the timestamp read 0:53 a.m. My wife met Jason in the hallway, visible to the game room camera. He pulled her in for a kiss, and they passionately made out for a brief moment. Playfully, she pushed him away and turned to leave the game room. As she did, he playfully slapped her on the bum, and she giggled her way out towards the main area. Even to a blind man, it was glaringly obvious they were having an affair. That was all the proof I needed. My heart raced so fast I thought I might have a heart attack. I wasn't angry, but I felt relieved that I finally had the evidence to confront my unfaithful wife. Just as I was about to close my laptop, she appeared on the footage again around 1:15 a.m. She went directly to the guest hallway, presumably heading to the guest bedroom where Jason was staying. She didn't emerge until 2:47 a.m. Since my son's girlfriend was staying in the guest room, Jason was the only person there. It was clear she had joined him in the guest bedroom for a private encounter. Afterward, she walked off towards the main area and then to our matrimonial bed where I was sleeping. Armed with the evidence I needed, I didn't wake her up the next morning. I contacted my lawyer, who referred me to a divorce attorney. I scheduled a meeting on the same day, and after the discussion, I had a better understanding of the significant financial impact this divorce would have on me. Despite the financial implications, I knew I had to follow through with a separation agreement. I couldn't continue a marriage with someone I couldn't trust, who had lied to me and shifted blame onto me, even accusing me of prejudice while taking advantage of a young man she was supposed to be mentoring. I realized I wouldn't want my kids to know the details of the divorce to avoid turning them against their mother. However, I had no desire for Jason to remain a part of our lives. Although I recognized the circumstances and that he might not have initiated the affair, I didn't want a constant reminder of my wife's infidelity. Whether I'd ever reveal this to my son and daughters, or if I wanted them to know, remained uncertain. Nonetheless, I intended to use it as a negotiating point in dealing with my wife. That evening, with my kids out of the house, I edited the video to include only the part where my wife and Jason were making out, and her visit to the guest bedroom from 1:15 a.m. to 2:47 a.m. I called her into the room and played it on my laptop. Just a few minutes into it, she realized what it was and covered her face with her hands. She refused to look at the screen or answer any of my questions. I wanted to know details about their relationship, like when it began, but she wouldn't provide any answers. All she did was sob, fully aware there was no excuse. I took that opportunity to give her a taste of what she had put me through during our trip. I called her various names, and the only time I got a reaction from her was when I mentioned sharing the video with our kids. She immediately stopped sobbing, looked at me, and began begging on her knees. She promised to do anything I asked to prevent me from revealing it to our children. I laid out my terms. She would accept any alimony I decided to pay, and we would proceed with an amicable divorce based on my conditions. In return, I agreed to go along with the story that our divorce was due to irreconcilable differences. The following day, we gathered our children and broke the news about our divorce. My wife and our 3 kids were present. The kids had numerous questions and made every effort to encourage us to reconcile. However, my wayward wife played her part, maintaining the story that both of us had been unhappy for a while and separation was the best option. It was a very emotional night. My wife tried her best to suppress her emotions so the kids would think she initiated the divorce, but it was clear that I was the one filing for it. No matter how hard we tried to hide it, she couldn't hold back her feelings, making it a profoundly sad day for our family. I tried to keep myself composed, but found myself shedding tears when I was alone in the bedroom. Well, that's the way it is. Another failed marriage for the same reason. I can't help but wonder why I keep getting married. Update: so, after we told our children about our separation, my kids understandably struggled with the news. My youngest, who is now 16, took it the hardest. She couldn't understand why we couldn't reconcile. The following day, my oldest daughter came to talk to me in the room that my wife and I used to share. My wife now sleeps in the guest room. My daughter told me that she had tried to reach her mother, knocking on her door, but she hadn't been getting any response. She was confused about when and how things had gone wrong because just a few days ago, we all seemed happy during the vacation trip. She sat next to me on the bed, trying to get me to reveal the reason for the divorce. Her continuous crying almost led me to slip up, as she put a lot of pressure on me. She mentioned that we had shut them out of our lives, and that bothered me because I didn't think we had. But I reassured her that her mother would let her know when things had calmed down. I explained that her mother and I had a great marriage and had raised 3 beautiful kids, for which I was grateful. However, there comes a time when people fall out of love, and that's what happened. I gave her a somewhat vague answer, and she was smart enough to sense that. She might have left the room, suspecting infidelity on my wife's part, but didn't want to push me too far, perhaps fearing what she might discover. Since she's close to her mom, I figured she'd find out the truth soon enough. The following day, I had an appointment with my otolaryngologist for a hearing aid that significantly improved my hearing. My wife remained secluded in her room for a couple of days. We typically eat dinner together, but my children took their food to their rooms, and I didn't see my wife all day. I was the only one at the dining table. My oldest daughter is an excellent cook, so she usually prepares meals for the family when she's back from college. She's a really great kid, and I couldn't be prouder of her. We used to be a normal, traditional American family. We'd eat dinner together, exchange kisses and I love yous, go to church as a family. It felt really strange to see my kids not having dinner together, and our family falling apart like this. I had spent years building this family to what it was, and my wife had just torn it apart because of an affair. As I sat alone at the dining table, I felt anger towards my wife, but I also questioned whether I was doing the right thing. I mean, I wasn't unhappy with the marriage before D-Day, and it's not like I wasn't getting enough closeness from my wife. I've heard stories of wives cheating and denying their husbands closeness during their affairs, but that wasn't the case for me. In my situation, my wife never denied me intimacy or affection throughout our marriage. She treated me incredibly well, and I always felt like I was her top priority, even before our children. Deep down, I felt jealous and betrayed. I questioned if her affair with Jason was driven by an insatiable desire she needed to satisfy. Maybe Jason was the easiest option for her because he was readily available. I wish it had been someone outside our close circle. It wouldn't have made it any easier, but it wouldn't have been someone my son considers his best friend and who's so close to our family. The next day, my son's girlfriend left, and I had a chance to talk to my son. Although we didn't delve into many details, he didn't ask why we were separating. He just wanted to know how I was coping. I knew he had been talking to my daughter based on the way he asked his questions. About a day later, my wife finally emerged from her sorrow. She looked like she had been crying a lot, with swollen eyes, unkempt hair, and appearing as though she hadn't showered for days. That evening, both of us ate the dinner my daughter had prepared, but we sat at opposite ends of the dining table. I felt like I should be the one who's hurt and crying with swollen eyes, while my wife should be the one on her knees begging for forgiveness. Instead, I felt alone, carrying the heavy burden of not being able to tell my kids about her affair. My kids seemed more concerned about my wife's well-being because she appeared to be taking it really hard. Normally, she's the life of the party, always cheerful, making everyone feel welcome and cared for. She's very nurturing and caring. Don't get me wrong, I'm deeply hurt by this, but I've become skilled at hiding it and pretending that everything is okay. The following day, my wife asked if we could go to a restaurant we both like to talk. I didn't really want to because I was still hurt by her affair, but considering the tension between us and the kids, I felt like we needed to break the ice. If we were going to separate, which was the plan, it should be done amicably. We shared the same car and didn't engage in much conversation during the ride. Upon our arrival, and as we took our seats, she immediately began by expressing her apologies. She acknowledged that she was sorry for all the pain she had caused me and for betraying my trust. She mentioned that she had been so embarrassed and ashamed that she didn't want to leave our room. She admitted to being selfish, driven by instinct, without considering the consequences for those she loves. She emphasized her deep love for me and her desire to spend the rest of her life with me. She revealed that she hadn't truly comprehended the extent of the pain she had inflicted until she was discovered. I allowed her to finish her apology before responding. I pointed out that her remorse seemed to stem from being caught, and I felt that we had a responsibility to be honest with our children. As soon as I mentioned this, her expression shifted to one of distress. She lowered her head, holding it with both hands as if she had a headache. After raising her head, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and began fanning herself as if she were hyperventilating. I remained stoic and didn't react to her dramatic response. She fell silent for a moment and then admitted that she understood she would eventually have to tell them the truth, but needed time to gather the courage. She inquired about ways to save our relationship. She suggested the idea of allowing an open marriage on my part while she remained faithful. She begged me not to pressure her to tell the children the truth and suggested that we keep it between us. I insisted that she had to tell the children the truth. I asked her how long the affair had been going on. She claimed that the affair had been going on for 6 years. Mind you, Jason must have been in high school then. I pressed her for more details, and she explained that the first occurrence happened accidentally. It was during our youngest daughter's basketball game. She was supposed to watch our daughter's first basketball game with our son, who had invited Jason to join them. The game was scheduled for around 5 p.m., but there was a delay, so our daughter was practicing with her team while our son either watched or played on his phone she couldn't recall. Jason was sitting between her and our son, and she engaged in a conversation with him. She mentioned needing some fresh air, and Jason accompanied her. They eventually found themselves in her minivan, and one thing led to another, resulting in a kiss and intimacy in the back of her minivan in the high school parking lot. She admitted feeling guilty and cheap about it, and they promised not to repeat it or disclose it to anyone. However, over the years, they continued their close encounters. Before our vacation, she hadn't seen him for over 6 months. She claimed she hadn't thought about it until Jason showed up to join us on vacation. I sensed she wasn't disclosing the whole story. I knew Jason hadn't invited himself. She had convinced him to come. I confronted her with this fact before she admitted to it. She wanted an opportunity to meet up with him again, and she had always desired to go on vacation with him, thinking this was her chance. She confessed they had been close the day before our vacation, caught by security cameras, and they were also intimate during the vacation when I discovered them. She explained that she cares about him and can't resist being physically close to him when they're together, but her love for me remains strong. She emphasized that the relationship with him was purely physical, perhaps trying to make me feel better about it. She mentioned that as she's gotten older, her desire for intimacy has increased significantly. According to her, a reduced intimacy left her constantly unsatisfied and frustrated since I no longer desired it as much as she did. She professed her deep love for me, but admitted to experiencing sexual frustration for a long time. To cope, she turned to Jason to fill the gap, and it reached a point where she couldn't control her desires, ultimately normalizing the affair. She revealed that she had sought help from a psychotherapist and was prescribed antidepressants used to treat conditions like depression, anxiety, or obsessive-compulsive disorder, which can help with compulsive sexual behaviors. However, she stopped taking the medication due to concerns about side effects. She claimed that psychotherapy and using certain adult toys had provided some relief, but the affair with Jason persisted. She maintained that he was the only person she had been unfaithful with, and the treatment and adult toys had helped her manage her urges. As she shared all this information, which she had never disclosed to me before, I felt bewildered and guilty. I wondered if knowing earlier might have led me to seek male enhancement medication to match her desires. When I asked her why she hadn't told me all this before, she said she had mentioned it several times, albeit not in great detail, dropping hints along the way. She felt that I had already withdrawn from our intimacy. She pointed out that I was only interested in intimacy 1 to 2 times a week, while she craved it at least once a day. She mentioned the times I had denied her intimacy, and how she had often been the one initiating it. She clarified that she wasn't trying to blame me, acknowledging that her sexual desire was the one that deviated from the norm. She wanted to work on herself because she recognized that I was already going through a lot. After our conversation at the restaurant, my anger had somewhat subsided. I had a sense of my wife's silent struggles, realizing she might have a borderline obsession with intimacy and had been trying to manage her desires. Although I had always known about this, I hadn't taken it seriously because she hadn't always been this way. She wasn't being dishonest when she claimed to have tried to communicate her needs to me, but I had dismissed her concerns, thinking it was just a passing phase. I even knew she had some toys, but I hadn't cared much since I was getting intimacy when I wanted it. I recognized that my mindset was somewhat selfish, and I should have paid more attention to her desires. I felt that she might be dealing with some form of illness and had been struggling with it. It was somewhat relieving to understand her perspective, but regardless of her state of mind, what she had done was wrong. She had broken our marriage vows, and I believe there should be consequences. However, at this point, I began to question my decision to divorce my unfaithful wife. Feeling the need to talk to someone, I scheduled an appointment with my therapist. He recommended that, considering the closeness of her relationship with her affair partner, she should cut off contact with Jason. I asked if he thought it was necessary to tell my children, but he explained that he couldn't assess the mental state of my wife and my children. He also mentioned that it might not matter much because Jason might inform my children himself. Nonetheless, what mattered most was that I control the narrative. He had no strong opinion on that, but suggested that if I chose not to inform my children, I should instruct my wife to tell Jason that their affair had been exposed and to never contact her or any of my family members again. He recommended considering a 2 to 3 month probation period to see if my feelings about divorce remained the same. He also suggested individual counseling for both of us, and, when asked about couples counseling, noted that it could be beneficial for her to express herself in front of an impartial observer. After the therapy session, I was uncertain about how I felt regarding the whole situation. However, as I contemplated the well-being of my children, the long-standing relationship I had built with my wife, and the happiness we had shared as a family, I concluded that it wouldn't hurt to give the 2 to 3 month probation a chance. That night, I discussed the conditions with my wife. I conveyed that she needed to cut off all contact with Jason and never communicate or meet with him again. I also informed her that we would disclose the affair to my son and my oldest daughter, who would then also cease contact with Jason. I made it clear that if she violated these terms, I would proceed with the divorce process that I had already initiated. She acknowledged her mistake and expressed her willingness to do whatever it took to salvage our marriage. Recognizing that the truth would eventually surface, she feared how our children would perceive her but agreed not to divulge explicit details and to accept the consequences. Following the discussion with my wife at the restaurant, tension in our household began to subside gradually. My children were curious and uncertain about whether we were still going through with the divorce, but they hadn't asked me directly. At this point, my kids started having dinner together as a family again, and things were slowly returning to normal in the household, although my wife and I were still sleeping in separate bedrooms. After the conversation with my wife regarding revealing her affair to my son and daughter, we decided to address it that night. After dinner, we sent our youngest daughter to her room and gathered my son and oldest daughter at the dining table. I began by explaining to my kids that their mother was the reason behind my initial desire for a divorce, but we were presently working towards reconciliation. To achieve this, she needed to confess her actions. Then it was my wife's turn to speak. It took her a while to find her words, and tears streamed down her face as my children watched in curiosity. Whether her emotions were genuine or a performance, it was painful to witness. Perhaps she was attempting to soften the impact by evoking sympathy, that's what I thought. She began by expressing her disappointment in herself and how she had embarrassed herself and made a huge mistake by engaging in an inappropriate relationship with Jason. The room fell silent as I glanced at my children to gauge their reactions. She kept her head down in shame, avoiding eye contact with my kids and me. As soon as she admitted this, my daughter's jaw dropped, and my son erupted in a fit of angry expletives. He abruptly stood up and stormed off to his bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Now, I sat across the dining table, my daughter positioned 2 chairs away to my right, and my wife sat on the opposite side. My daughter wore a shocked expression for at least a minute before she loudly whispered, "I knew it, I knew it." I remained in my seat, observing the unfolding drama, my emotions mixed and uncertain about how to interpret the situation. My daughter approached me, offering a hug, and even though I didn't respond, she clung to me tightly. Meanwhile, my wife was openly sobbing, and I suspected my daughter was shedding tears as well. Witnessing my wife's profound anguish, I felt genuine concern for her. I'd never seen her so distraught. Eventually, my wife got up and left the room, retreating to the guest room and shutting the door behind her. My daughter asked if I was okay, and I assured her that I was. I explained that I had had sufficient time to process the information, and while I hadn't forgiven her mother, I did understand why it had happened. I also conveyed that I didn't want to keep them in the dark any longer, which was why I had pushed her to reveal the truth. That night, I went to bed with a clear conscience, knowing that tomorrow was a new beginning and it was better to start with honesty rather than continue with lies. The following day, my daughter prepared breakfast for me. My wife remained in her room, and my son had already left the house. My daughter informed me that he was still upset and planning to move out to get away from his mother because he couldn't bear to be around her. During most of the morning, I conversed with my daughters, especially my oldest one, who tried to divert my thoughts from my wife's infidelity and infuse some positivity. By the afternoon, my wife still hadn't emerged from her room, which concerned my daughter because they had plans to run errands and were running late. She knocked on the door for what felt like over 10 minutes, but my wife didn't respond. As the evening approached and my wife still hadn't emerged from her room, worry began to creep in. I decided to knock on the door myself, but she didn't answer. I had believed that things were improving, but it appeared my wife wasn't handling the situation well. Initially, I thought she might be too ashamed to face my kids, but the situation felt increasingly peculiar. During dinner that night, she didn't join us, and my son hadn't returned home either. I called him to check on him, and he informed me he was at a friend's place. So it was just me and my 2 daughters having dinner that night. When I didn't receive any word from my wife the next morning, I sensed that something was amiss. I decided to force the door open with my oldest daughter's help, but it was bolted from the inside. As we managed to open the door, we discovered my wife lying face down under the covers. I also noticed some pills and a glass of water nearby. Immediately, I instructed my daughter to call. I checked for her pulse, but her body had already started to change color. My younger daughter started crying and shook my wife, trying to wake her up, while my older daughter was on the phone with the emergency services, becoming increasingly distressed. It didn't require a medical professional to see that she had passed away nearly a day ago. I felt completely numb, torn between crying and shouting, overwhelmed by shock and guilt, convinced that this was all my fault. It took me a while to regain my composure. The ambulance had already arrived and was preparing to place her in a body bag. I'm not sure who contacted my son, but he had already arrived and was sobbing uncontrollably. I spent almost the entire night speaking with the investigators.
Story 3.
The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Tony Hayes' 40th floor office in downtown Chicago. His calloused fingers traced the grain of his mahogany desk, a daily ritual that reminded him of where he'd started. 20 years ago, those same hands had gripped nail guns and lumber. Building other people's dreams while pursuing his own, Tony stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, watching construction cranes dance their slow ballet across the city skyline. Each movement reminded him of his journey from the ground up. He'd started as a teenager, carrying lumber and mixing concrete under the scorching summer sun. While other young men wasted their evenings at bars, Tony attended night classes at the local community college, studying construction management with an intensity that made his instructors take notice. "Mr. Hayes?" His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. "The contractors for the Michigan Avenue project are here for the budget review. Send them in, Angela." Tony straightened his Italian silk tie, a far cry from the second-hand clothes he'd worn on construction sites. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a self-made man. His 6-foot frame remained solid from years of physical labor. Now wrapped in a custom-tailored suit that spoke of success without shouting it, the meeting room filled with nervous energy as 5 contractors took their seats. Tony remained standing, spreading out their proposal documents with methodical precision. He'd spotted 3 major discrepancies in their budget within minutes of reviewing it, the kind of details that separated survivors from failures in this business. "Gentlemen," Tony's voice carried the weight of authority earned through experience. "Let's discuss your concrete estimates for the foundation." He tapped a highlighted figure that he knew was deliberately inflated. "Care to explain why you're charging premium rates for standard mix?" The lead contractor shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hayes, with current market conditions." "Save it." Tony cut him off without raising his voice. "I've poured more foundations than everyone in this room combined. Either revise these numbers by Monday, or I'll find someone who will." The meeting ended 30 minutes later with revised estimates that would save his company $500,000. As the contractors filed out, Tony caught fragments of their whispered conversation. "Hard S doesn't miss a thing. Heard he started as a day laborer." Tony allowed himself a small smile. "Let them talk." In this business, respect meant more than popularity. He returned to his private office, loosening his tie as he settled into his leather chair. The sun had dipped lower, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of amber and gold. His phone buzzed. Lisa's face appeared on the screen, a recent photo where she looked 10 years younger than her 39 years. Thanks to expensive treatment she'd insisted were necessary. The text message read, "Working late again?" Tony's jaw tightened as he detected the familiar note of mockery in those 3 words. He remembered a time when Lisa's messages had been full of love and encouragement. Back then, she'd pack him lunches for his construction shifts, calculate their budget together at their tiny kitchen table, dream about the future they'd build together. That Lisa had vanished, replaced by a woman obsessed with appearances and status. These days, she spent more time at her luxury gym than at home, constantly posting selfies on social media, fishing for validation from strangers. Her transformation had been gradual, like water eroding stone, but the past 6 months had accelerated the change dramatically. Another notification popped up, an email from his daughter Mary. Tony's chest tightened as he read the subject line, "Need money, Ace?" He opened it, already knowing what he'd find. "Dad, need another $500 for school supplies and project materials." "Don't be cheap. We both know you can afford it. My friends' parents never give them a hard time about money, Mary." The words hit harder than any construction accident ever had. His 19-year-old daughter, once a sweet girl who'd draw him pictures of the buildings he worked on, had become a mirror image of her mother, entitled, manipulative, and cruel. Every interaction now revolved around money or comparisons to her friends' wealthier parents. Tony remembered Mary's high school graduation just last year. He'd arranged for her to have a private tour of his biggest project, a 40-story luxury residential tower that represented everything he'd achieved. Instead of showing interest, she'd spent the entire time texting her friends and complaining about the dust on her designer shoes. "Your father built this," Lisa had said, not with pride but with a dismissive wave. "Though I don't know why he doesn't hire someone else to handle the site visits now. It's not like we need him to keep working so hard." Tony closed the email without responding. He pulled up his calendar, noting Lisa's schedule. Thursday evenings were usually reserved for her book club, a recent addition to her routine that he'd grown increasingly suspicious of. She used to share stories about the books they discussed, but those conversations had stopped months ago. That he opened his desk drawer and removed a small notebook. Old habits died hard, and he still preferred pen and paper for his most private thoughts. Inside, he'd been documenting changes in Lisa's behavior, new workout wardrobe, more revealing than her usual style, password changed on phone 3 times in 2 months, suspicious text notifications that she quickly dismisses coming home with damp hair on, book club, nights increased criticism of his work schedule, and appearing secret phone calls in the bathroom with shower running. The pattern was clear to anyone who paid attention. And Tony Hayes had built his career on attention to detail. He closed the notebook and slipped it back into the drawer. The Chicago skyline had darkened, office lights twinkling like stars against the approaching night. That a notification from his home security app showed Lisa's car pulling into their driveway much earlier than usual for a Thursday. Tony checked the time, 5:47 p.m. Book club didn't end until 8:30. Something was off. That he gathered his briefcase, nodding to Angela as he left the office. Heading home early today. Everything all right, Mr. Hayes? Angela had been his secretary for 10 years, long enough to know his patterns. We'll see, Tony replied, his voice carrying a weight that made Angela glance up from her computer. She'd seen that look before, usually before he discovered major problems on construction sites. The drive home through Chicago traffic gave Tony time to think, to plan. He'd built his empire by anticipating problems before they became disasters. Now, watching his family life show signs of structural failure, he'd apply those same skills to understanding exactly what was happening under his own roof. Little did Lisa and Mary know, but they were about to learn why Tony Hayes had survived and thrived in one of the city's most cutthroat industries. In construction, you learned to spot the cracks before the whole structure came crashing down. And Tony had started to see cracks everywhere he looked. Tony's Mercedes rolled silently into the curved driveway of his suburban home, the kind of house that showed success without flaunting it. Lisa's white Range Rover sat in its usual spot, looking freshly washed, another new habit she'd developed recently. The house lights were on, and through the kitchen window, he could see movement and hear muffled laughter. 20 years of marriage had taught Tony to read the signs of his home like he read construction blueprints. The empty recycling bins hadn't been brought in, though that was supposedly Mary's chore. Lisa's gardening tools lay scattered by the flower beds she'd insisted on having professionally installed last spring, but never tended to herself. Small details that painted a larger picture of neglect and changing priorities. That as he approached the side door that led to the kitchen, his preferred entrance since it offered a clear view of the entire first floor, Tony heard voices carrying through the slightly open window. Years of conducting surprise site inspections had taught him the value of quiet observation. He stopped, standing motionless in the growing darkness. He'll never find out. Lisa's voice carried a note of smug satisfaction that made Tony's stomach turn. He's too busy working. Mary's laughter joined in, the sound sharp and mocking, so different from the giggling little girl who used to run to greet him after work. Yeah, Dad's too boring for you, Mom. You need someone who knows how to have fun. Ryan definitely knows how to please a woman. Lisa's voice dropped to a sultry purr that Tony had never heard her use in their marriage. God, you should see him at the gym. The way he spots me during squats. The name hit Tony like a defective support beam, Ryan. His hands clenched involuntarily, but his face remained impassive. Years of negotiating with corrupt contractors had taught him the value of a poker face. I still can't believe Dad hasn't noticed, Mary continued, her voice dripping with contempt. Remember last week when Ryan texted during dinner, and Mom almost spit out her wine? Your father notices the cost of every nail on his construction sites, Lisa replied, but he doesn't notice when his own wife gets her needs met elsewhere. That's what happens when you marry someone so limited. Tony felt each word like a physical blow, but he didn't move. Let them talk. Let them reveal everything. In construction, you learn to test the integrity of a structure before attempting repairs or demolition. How long are you going to keep stringing Dad along? Mary asked, the sound of a wine bottle clinking against a glass punctuating her question. At 19, she shouldn't have been drinking, but that was the least of Tony's concerns right now. Until I'm ready, Lisa's voice took on a calculating tone. Ryan's young, exciting, but I need to make sure things are settled before making any moves. Your father may be boring, but he's not stupid when it comes to money. Mom, please. Dad's totally clueless. He probably thinks you're actually reading books at your Thursday meetings. The sound of their shared laughter drove Tony to action. He deliberately scuffed his shoes on the welcome mat, making enough noise to announce his presence before pushing the door open. The kitchen fell silent instantly. Lisa stood by the granite counter she'd insisted on having installed last year. Her gym-toned body wrapped in expensive athleisure, where that seemed designed more for showing off than working out. Mary sat at the kitchen island, a half-empty wine glass by her hand that suddenly disappeared behind her back. They exchanged quick, nervous glances that confirmed everything Tony needed to know. "What's so funny?" Tony asked, his voice carefully neutral as he set his briefcase down on the counter. He noted how Lisa subtly shifted to block his view of her phone screen, that Mary's lip curled in that familiar expression of disdain she'd perfected since starting college. "Oh, nothing, Dad. Just girl talk. You wouldn't get it?" She shot her mother a look that carried volumes of shared secrets. Lisa busied herself with the coffee maker, not quite meeting his eyes. "How was work, honey? We weren't expecting you home so early." Her voice carried forced cheerfulness that wouldn't have fooled a first-year apprentice, let alone a man who'd spent decades reading people's true intentions. "Thought I'd surprise you." Tony loosened his tie, studying their body language. Lisa's shoulders were tense, and Mary was fidgeting with her phone, probably warning someone. "Don't let me interrupt your conversation. We were just finishing up," Lisa said quickly, shooting Mary another meaningful look. "Actually, I need to run to the store. We're out of milk." She grabbed her purse. Never mind that Tony could see a full gallon of milk through the clear refrigerator door. "I'll come with you, Mom." Mary jumped up, nearly knocking over the wine glass she'd tried to hide. "Need to pick up some study supplies." Tony watched them scramble to create distance, to escape the tension they'd created. The same way subcontractors tried to flee a site inspection when they knew their work wouldn't pass muster. He didn't stop them in construction. You learn to let people reveal their own shortcuts and failures. "Don't forget your book club tonight," Tony called after Lisa as she rushed past him. "Wouldn't want to miss any exciting chapters." Lisa froze for just a moment, her designer purse clutched tight against her chest. "All right, thanks for reminding me." She hurried out without kissing him goodbye. Another change from their old routine. The front door closed, and Tony heard the Range Rover's engine start up. He waited until the sound faded before moving to the kitchen window, watching their hasty departure. Lisa was already on her phone, probably calling or texting this Ryan character. Tony pulled out his own phone and opened his contacts. He scrolled past dozens of business numbers until he found the one he needed. Miles Carter, a cybersecurity expert who owed him a favor from the Robertson Project 2 years ago. Tony had saved Miles's company from bankruptcy by extending payment terms when banks wouldn't touch him. Time to cash in that debt. But first, Tony did what he always did before starting a new project. He walked the site. In this case, his own home. He moved from room to room, noting changes he'd been too busy to process before. Expensive new yoga mats in Lisa's home gym. Shopping bags from boutiques he'd never heard of stuffed in closet corners. Mary's credit card statements scattered across her desk, showing charges at high-end restaurants when she was supposedly studying at the library to in the master bathroom. He found a receipt crumpled in the trash. La Perla lingerie, purchased 2 days ago. Lisa hadn't worn lingerie for him in years, claiming it was uncomfortable and old-fashioned. Tony took photos of everything with his phone, documenting evidence like he would on a troubled construction site. Then he returned to his home office, closed the door, and made the call that would change everything. "Miles, it's Tony Hayes. Remember that favor you owe me from the Robertson Project?" Miles Carter's office occupied the back room of a nondescript building in one of Chicago's less fashionable neighborhoods. Tony sat across from his old friend, watching as Miles connected various pieces of surveillance equipment to his computer. The room hummed with the sound of servers and cooling fans, the digital age's equivalent of construction machinery. "These cameras are virtually undetectable," Miles explained, holding up a device no larger than a button. "Motion-activated, wireless, and they'll upload everything directly to a secure server. Even if someone finds them, they can't access the footage without my encryption keys." Tony nodded, his face illuminated by the blue glow of multiple monitors. "And the phone? Already done?" Miles pulled up a series of screens showing text messages, call logs, and location data. "The spyware is installed on Lisa's phone. She'll never know it's there. Everything she does, calls, texts, photos, internet history, will see it all. Show me how to access it." Tony leaned forward, his construction manager's mind already cataloging the information like he would materials on a job site for the next 2 hours. Miles walked Tony through the surveillance system. Tony took notes in his small notebook, treating the information like blueprints for a new project. In construction, precision meant the difference between success and catastrophic failure. This would be no different. One more thing, Miles said as Tony prepared to leave. I did some preliminary digging on this Ryan character. Ryan Blake, 28, personal trainer at Elite Fitness on Michigan Avenue. Want to see what I found? Tony settled back into his chair. Everything. Miles turned to his largest monitor and pulled up a series of documents. Ryan Blake started at Elite Fitness 3 years ago. Before that, he bounced between 4 different gyms in 18 months. Want to guess why? Tony studied the screen, his eyes narrowing at a series of redacted documents. Show me. Sexual harassment complaints. 3 of them. Miles clicked through PDF files. All settled quietly. Elite Fitness either didn't do their homework when hiring him, or they didn't care. He's got a pattern targeting wealthy married women, especially ones with busy husbands. The information hit Tony like concrete, heavy and cold. Financial status? Lives beyond his means. Leases a BMW he can barely afford. Rents a luxury apartment in River North. Miles pulled up bank statements. He's got expensive taste, but a trainer's salary. Makes his money through alternative means. Private sessions. Tony's voice carried a dangerous edge. That's what he calls them. Miles hesitated. Tony, there's more. I found his private cloud storage. He likes to keep trophies, photos, videos, text messages. Your Lisa isn't his first married client, if you get my meaning. Tony's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest. Show me everything. Every file, every message, every location he's visited with my wife. For the next hour, they went through Ryan's digital footprint. Tony watched as Miles reconstructed the affair timeline through text messages, location data, and hotel receipts. The evidence was damning. Lisa and Ryan had been meeting 3 times a week, coordinating their schedules through a secret messaging app. What about Mary's involvement? Tony asked. Remembering his daughter's role in this betrayal, Miles pulled up another series of messages. She's been acting as lookout, covering for her mother. There are texts between them coordinating stories to tell you. She's even made hotel reservations for them, using your credit card, probably figured you wouldn't notice among her usual shopping charges. Tony thought about all the times Mary had asked for money lately, wondering how much had gone to fund her mother's affair. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. Corruption spreading through his family like rot through load-bearing beams. I need every piece of evidence backed up, Tony said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Hotel receipts, messages, photos, everything. And I need it organized in a way that would stand up in court. Miles nodded, understanding the implications. I'll create multiple secure copies. But Tony, what are you planning to do with all this? What I always do when I find structural failures, Tony replied, standing up. Demolition and reconstruction. Some buildings can't be saved. They need to be taken down to their foundations. Over the next week, Tony watched through his new surveillance system as his wife and daughter's deception played out in high definition. The cameras caught Lisa preening before her workout sessions, Mary helping her choose outfits, both of them laughing at his supposed ignorance. Every disrespectful comment, every secret phone call, every lie was recorded and cataloged. He reviewed the footage each night in his office, building his case with the same methodical precision he used for construction projects. The cameras caught Lisa staging fake book club meetings, Mary creating alibis, and both of them mocking him behind his back. The final piece fell into place when Lisa announced she had a special book club meeting planned, an overnight retreat to discuss their latest novel. Tony watched through the surveillance cameras as Mary helped her mother pack an overnight bag, including the new La Perla lingerie. Make sure Dad doesn't check your credit card statement, Lisa told Mary, unaware that their conversation was being recorded. The hotel might show up. Please, Mom. Mary rolled her eyes, holding up a lacy negligee. Dad never checks anything except his precious construction budgets. Ryan's going to love this on you. Tony sat in his dark office, watching the scene unfold on his monitor. His face showed no emotion as he opened his laptop and began typing. The document header read, "Evidence for divorce proceedings." In construction, timing was everything. You had to wait for the right moment to demolish a condemned building. One wrong move could damage surrounding structures. Tony Hayes had spent his career learning the art of controlled demolition. Now, watching his wife and daughter plan their next betrayal, he allowed himself a small, cold smile. They thought he was oblivious, too focused on his work to see what was happening under his own roof. They were about to learn why Tony Hayes had survived and thrived in Chicago's ruthless construction industry. Some men might have confronted their wives immediately, driven by emotion to demand explanations. But Tony wasn't most men. He'd built his empire by understanding that timing and preparation were everything. Each piece of evidence was another charge placed strategically for maximum impact. When the explosion came, and it would come, there would be nothing left standing. Tony sat in his parked car outside Elite Fitness, watching Lisa's Range Rover pull into the premium parking space she'd insisted on paying extra for. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see Ryan Blake waiting in the lobby, his trainer's uniform tight enough to show off every muscle. The surveillance cameras had captured Lisa's excited preparation for this special training session earlier that morning. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from Mary. "Mom's all set for her big night. I helped her pick the perfect outfit." Winky face. The winky face emoji made his jaw clench. He opened the secure monitoring app Miles had installed, watching the scene unfold through the gym security cameras. Another system Miles had easily compromised. Lisa practically bounced through the lobby, her designer gym bag containing not workout clothes, but the new lingerie Mary had helped her choose. "Mrs. Hayes." Ryan's voice carried clearly through Tony's surveillance equipment. "Ready for your intense workout? I've been looking forward to it all week." Lisa's voice dripped with suggestion. "Mary made sure everything's arranged perfectly. Your daughter's been really helpful with our training schedule." Ryan guided Lisa toward the private consultation room. "Sweet kid." Tony's fingers tightened on his steering wheel. Sweet. The word felt like acid. He watched them disappear into the consultation room, then opened his laptop. The screen displayed multiple video feeds, the gym security cameras, Lisa's compromised phone camera, and the hidden cameras he'd had installed throughout the house. His phone rang. "Miles, everything's recording," Miles confirmed. "Audio, video, GPS tracking, we're catching it all." "But Tony, are you sure you want to see this? Most guys wouldn't." "I'm not most guys." Tony's voice was steel. "I need every detail documented. Keep recording." For the next hour, Tony forced himself to watch as Lisa and Ryan's training session moved from the gym to the luxury hotel Mary had booked using Tony's credit card. Every kiss, every touch, every betrayal was captured in high definition. His phone buzzed again with texts from Mary. "Mom's having the best time. Ryan's taking real good care of her. Don't wait up, Dad. Mom's book club might run really late tonight." Winky face. Tony opened his evidence folder, creating a new subfolder labeled Mary's Complicity. Each text message was screenshot and saved, each location ping logged and timestamped. He learned long ago that demolition required careful documentation for legal purposes and for personal satisfaction. 8:09 p.m. His office phone rang. Lisa's number. "Hey, honey." Her voice was breathless. "Book club is running late. We're really deep into this chapter. Take your time," Tony replied evenly, watching her naked form curl against Ryan on his laptop screen. "How's the book?" "Oh, it's intense. Lots of unexpected twists." Lisa giggled, and Tony heard Ryan's muffled laughter in the background. "Don't wait up for me." "I won't." Tony ended the call, adding the recording to his evidence file. He opened his email and began composing several messages, each one carefully worded and attached with selected video clips from tonight's surveillance. The first email was addressed to James Morrison, CEO of Elite Fitness. Subject: Urgent Employee Misconduct Evidence Attachment. Ryan Blake _client misconduct.mp4. The second went to Lisa's employer, where she worked as a senior account manager. Subject: Ethics Violation Evidence Attachment. Lisa Hayes _professional misconduct.mp4. The third was addressed to the Dean of Student Affairs at Mary's College. Subject: Student Code of Conduct Violation Attachment. Mary Hayes _for evidence.mp4. Tony saved all 3 emails to his drafts folder. Timing was everything in demolition. You had to set the charges in precisely the right sequence. His phone buzzed with another update from Mary. OMG, Dad, you should see Mom living her best life. So much better than being stuck at home with you. Tony added the message to his evidence folder. The emojis his daughter used to mock him would make excellent exhibits in the divorce proceedings. He opened another document and began typing, petition for divorce grounds. Adultery supporting evidence. See exhibits A through Z. A notification popped up on his laptop. Lisa's phone ordering an Uber to return to the hotel after a quick stop at home for fresh clothes. Mary's location showed she was waiting at the house. Ready to help her mother prepare for another round of betrayal, Tony leaned back in his chair, watching the pieces of his revenge fall into place. In construction, every project required 3 things: proper planning, precise timing, and absolute commitment to seeing it through. He learned early that half measures led to collapse. His phone lit up with a text from Lisa. Such a great discussion at book club. The women really loved this chapter. Tony allowed himself a cold smile as he typed his response. Glad you're enjoying yourself. Take lots of pictures. And she did, unknowingly documenting her own destruction with every photo, every message, every moment of her special night. Through his surveillance network, Tony watched as Mary helped Lisa prepare for her second hotel visit, the 2 of them laughing and taking selfies, completely unaware that every incriminating image was being backed up to Tony's secure server. You're so much happier without Dad breathing down your neck, Mary said, helping Lisa touch up her makeup. The hidden cameras caught every word. Ryan's exactly what you need. Your father would never understand, Lisa replied, checking her appearance in the mirror. He's too basic. All he cares about is work. Well, he can keep his precious construction sites, Mary laughed, handing Lisa the key card to the hotel room. You deserve some real excitement. Tony watched them leave together, Mary driving Lisa back to the hotel where Ryan waited. His daughter, not only enabling her mother's affair, but actively participating in the deception. Treating it like some exciting game, he opened his laptop one more time, reviewing the evidence he'd gathered. Videos, photos, text messages, hotel receipts, location data, all meticulously organized and backed up. In construction, you learned to document everything. Evidence was like concrete. It needed to be solid, unmovable, and permanent. Tomorrow, the charges he'd set would begin to detonate. But tonight, he would let them enjoy their last few hours of thinking they'd outsmarted him. After all, the best demolitions were the ones the target never saw coming until it was too late. Monday morning arrived with the steady drumbeat of rain against the windows of Tony's office. He sat at his desk, watching the clock tick toward 9 a.m. The timing had to be perfect, like demolishing a building in a crowded city. Each charge had to detonate in sequence to exactly 9 a.m. Tony pressed send on the first email. James Morrison, CEO of Elite Fitness, would be starting his morning routine now. Tony had studied his schedule just as carefully as he'd studied Ryan's. The phone rang exactly 7 minutes later. Tony Hayes speaking. Mr. Hayes. Morrison's voice trembled with barely contained rage. I just reviewed your email and attachments. I don't know what to say. This is beyond unacceptable. I trust you'll handle it appropriately. Tony's voice remained professional, controlled. Ryan Blake is being terminated immediately. We'll need your wife's testimony for the legal proceedings. I'm sure she'll be very cooperative. Tony allowed himself a small smile, especially once the police review the other evidence of his activities with married clients. The next email went out at 9:15 a.m. Time to reach Lisa's boss, just as the morning management meeting began. Tony had met Gerald Thompson at corporate events, a stern traditionalist who prided himself on his firm's reputation for moral conduct. His phone lit up with a text from Lisa. Going to my morning workout. Don't wait up tonight. Tony watched through the gym's cameras as Lisa strutted into Elite Fitness, heading straight for the private training area. She stopped short at the sight of 2 security guards escorting Ryan out, his trainer's badge already confiscated. Ryan? Lisa's voice carried clearly through Tony's surveillance equipment. What's happening? Ma'am, one of the guards blocked her path. Mr. Blake is no longer employed here. Please see the front desk to reassign your training sessions. Lisa's phone began ringing. Through his monitoring app, Tony saw Gerald Thompson's name on her screen. She answered, her voice still confident. Gerald? I'm just at the gym. Get to my office. Now. Thompson's voice was ice. And Lisa? Don't bother changing. The gym clothes you're wearing will be perfect for clearing out your desk. Tony opened his laptop, watching Lisa's GPS signal as she drove to her office. The cameras he had installed in the parking garage caught her mascara-streaked face as she rushed inside. 20 minutes later, those same cameras recorded her exit, carrying a cardboard box of personal items while former colleagues whispered and pointed. His phone buzzed with a frantic text from Mary. Dad, something's wrong. Mom just got fired. WTF is happening? Tony didn't respond. Instead, he pressed send on the third email, this one time to reach Mary's college dean during morning office hours. The dean's response came within minutes. Mr. Hayes, this evidence is disturbing and clearly violates our student code of conduct. We'll need to convene an emergency disciplinary board. Tony's phone exploded with notifications. Mary, Dad, the dean just called me to his office. What did you do? Lisa, Tony, please call me. Something's happening. Ryan, listen, man, we need to talk. He ignored them all, instead opening a new email to his lawyer. The subject line read, divorce filing time sensitive. The responses rolled in throughout the day. Lisa, my entire department saw the videos. How could you do this to me? Mary, they're kicking me out of school. Dad, please, you have to help me. Ryan, some guys jumped me outside my apartment. Call them off. Tony sat back in his chair, remembering all the construction projects he'd overseen. The key to a controlled demolition was to weaken all support structures simultaneously. Remove one pillar, and the building might lean. Remove them all, and it collapses perfectly into its own footprint. At 3 p.m., his secretary buzzed him. Mr. Hayes, your wife and daughter are here. They are quite insistent on seeing you. Send them in. Tony straightened his tie. The same way he'd prepare for any other business meeting, Lisa burst through the door first, her gym clothes replaced by a hastily thrown-on business suit. Mary followed, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. Their makeup was smeared, their confident facades cracked. How could you? Lisa's voice shook with rage and fear. Do you know what you've done? Tony leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanging. Please tell me what I've done. Explain it to me, the way you explained to Mary how boring I am. The way you laughed about how I'd never notice your little games. Dad, please. Mary stepped forward, tears streaking her expensive mascara. We can explain everything. Explain? Tony's voice remained calm, but his eyes were steel. Like you explained to your friends how pathetic your father is? Like you explained to your mother how to hide her affair using my credit cards? It was just some fun. Lisa's voice rose hysterically. It didn't mean anything. Nothing means anything to you, Lisa. Not our marriage, not our family, not even our daughter's morals. Tony stood slowly. You turned her into your accomplice, taught her to mock and deceive her own father. You can't do this to us. Mary's voice cracked. Where am I supposed to go? What about my future? Your future? Tony's laugh was cold. You should have thought about that before you started planning your mother's hookups with her boy toy. Before you helped destroy your own family. Tony, please. Lisa tried a different approach, stepping closer. We can work this out. Go to counseling. Start fresh. The way you started fresh with Ryan. Tony pressed a button on his phone, and their voices filled the office. Lisa's recorded voice. He'll never find out. He's too busy working. Mary's laughter. Yeah, Dad's too boring for you, Mom. Lisa again. Ryan definitely knows how to please a woman. The color drained from both their faces as the recording continued, playing back every mocking comment, every cruel laugh, every calculated deception. I want you both out of my house by tonight. Tony's voice cut through their stunned silence. The security team is already there supervising. Take your personal items only. Everything else belongs to me as outlined in the prenuptial agreement you never bothered to read carefully, Lisa. You can't, Lisa started. I can. I did. It's done. Tony sat back down, turning to his computer. The divorce papers have been filed. Your lawyer can contact my lawyer. though finding one willing to take your case might be difficult, given how thoroughly the videos have circulated. "Dad," Mary tried one last time, her voice small. "Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore." Tony didn't look up from his screen. "You chose your side. Live with it." "You're heartless," Lisa spat, grabbing her purse. "Come on, Mary. He's always been like this, cold, unfeeling." "No, Lisa. I love my family. You just loved yourselves more." Tony finally looked up. "The guards will escort you out. Don't bother trying to access any accounts or credit cards. They're all frozen." They left his office in tears, their designer clothes and expensive accessories unable to shield them from the stares of his employees. Tony watched through his office window as they hurried to Lisa's Range Rover. Soon to be repossessed, his phone buzzed one final time. A text from Ryan. "Man, I'm sorry. I'll stay away from her, I swear. Just call off your guys." Tony allowed himself a small smile as he typed his response. "The guys? They're just getting started." The rain continued to fall outside his window, washing away the last traces of the family he'd once treasured. In construction, you learned that sometimes the only way forward was to demolish the damaged structure completely. Only then could you build something new on solid foundations. The next morning dawned cold and gray over Chicago. Tony stood in his kitchen, drinking coffee from the expensive machine Lisa had insisted on buying. Through his network of surveillance cameras, he watched the final stages of his plan unfold across the city. His phone lit up with a news alert from a local blog. "Elite fitness scandal. Trainers' misconduct exposed." The article detailed Ryan's history of inappropriate relationships with married clients, complete with carefully selected video clips that Miles had anonymously leaked to the press that a text from his private investigator came in. Blake spotted at Northwestern Memorial. Broken nose, 2 cracked ribs. Won't press charges, knows better. Tony smiled coldly into his coffee cup. The security contractors he'd hired had done their job well, sending a message that Ryan wouldn't soon forget. But physical pain was just the beginning. His phone rang. "Miles?" "It's done," Miles reported. Blake's landlord received an anonymous tip about his extracurricular activities. Along with proof, he's been running an illegal side business from the apartment. And eviction notice posted an hour ago. He's got 48 hours to clear out. Tony opened his laptop, checking his surveillance feeds. Ryan's Instagram account, once full of shirtless gym photos and client testimonials, had been flooded with comments about his predatory behavior. His professional certification was under review. His reputation, the foundation of his career as a personal trainer, was in ruins that a notification popped up. Mary had posted on social media. "To all my friends and followers, due to recent events, I'll be taking a break from school and social media. Please respect my privacy during this difficult time." The comments below were merciless. "Can't believe you helped your mom cheat. Daddy's money can't fix this mess. What happened to living your best life?" Tony clicked through the surveillance footage from the previous night. The security team had supervised as Lisa and Mary packed their personal belongings, preventing them from taking anything of significant value. The cameras caught their tearful exit, dragging suitcases past the luxury cars they could no longer access. His phone buzzed with a message from Lisa's sister. "How could you humiliate her like this? She's family." Tony typed back. "She stopped being family when she and Mary decided to make a mockery of it." The doorbell rang. Through the security camera, Tony saw his lawyer, Patricia Martinez, waiting on the porch with a leather briefcase. He let her in, leading her to his home office. "The divorce filing is proceeding exactly as planned," Patricia reported, spreading documents across his desk. "Given the overwhelming evidence and the prenuptial agreement, Lisa doesn't have a leg to stand on. And Mary's trust fund? Legally dissolved as of this morning." Patricia allowed herself a small smile. The terms were clear. Any involvement in activities damaging to the family's reputation would result in immediate termination of the trust. "The video evidence more than qualifies." Tony nodded, signing where she indicated. "Have they found lawyers yet?" "Lisa's tried 6 firms. None will take her case. The evidence is too damning, and your reputation in the construction industry is too valuable." Patricia gathered the signed papers. "As for Mary, she's technically an adult. Her academic misconduct is her problem to solve." A notification lit up Tony's phone. A forwarded email from Mary's university. Student Disciplinary Board Decision. After reviewing the evidence of Ms. Hayes' involvement in activities contrary to the university's moral code, the board has voted for immediate expulsion. Tony closed the email without finishing it. On his surveillance feed, he could see Mary sitting in a cheap coffee shop, frantically typing on her laptop, probably searching for another school that would accept her. But her academic record would follow her everywhere now. A digital scarlet letter. She'd never escape. His phone buzzed again. Lisa calling from an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker. "Tony, please." Her voice cracked with desperation. "The bank accounts are frozen. My cards don't work. I can't even buy groceries. Mary needs her medication. We're staying at the Motel 6 on Roosevelt, and I don't know how much longer I can afford it. Please, we need to talk." He deleted the message before it finished. Through his surveillance network, he could see Lisa's Range Rover parked outside the motel. It would be repossessed within the hour. The repo company had been generously compensated to ensure the timing coincided with her job interview at a small marketing firm. "One more thing," Patricia said, pausing at his office door. Ryan Blake tried to apply for a personal trainer position at 3 other gyms this morning. Anonymous tips about his history arrived at each one within minutes of his applications. Tony nodded. "In construction, you learn to secure a site after demolition. No loose ends, no safety hazards left unaddressed. Keep me updated on the divorce proceedings. I want this finished as quickly as possible." After Patricia left, Tony poured himself another coffee and opened his email. Dozens of messages from Lisa's and Mary's friends and family members waited, ranging from angry accusations to desperate pleas for mercy. He deleted them all without reading. His phone lit up with a final text from Mary. "Dad, Mom's falling apart. We have nothing left. Please, I know we hurt you, but this is too much. We're your family." Tony typed his response slowly, each word deliberate. "No, you were never my daughter. Now you're nothing." He turned back to his computer, opening the construction plans for his newest project, a luxury high-rise that would reshape the Chicago skyline. The past was demolished. The foundation was clear. Time to build something new. The Cook County Courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its limestone facade as cold and impassive as Tony Hayes himself. He straightened his charcoal suit Italian wool, a reminder of how far he'd come from his construction worker days, and climbed the steps alongside his lawyer, Patricia Martinez. "They're already inside," Patricia murmured, checking her phone. Lisa found a lawyer willing to take her case. Marcus Davidson. Tony's lip curled slightly. Davidson was known for taking desperate cases, usually charging excessive fees up front, because he knew there'd be no victory percentage to collect. Let them try. The courtroom doors opened to reveal Lisa sitting at the defendant's table, her designer clothes replaced by a modest department store suit that didn't quite fit. Her carefully maintained highlights had grown out, showing gray at the roots. Next to her, Marcus Davidson shuffled through papers with nervous energy. Mary sat in the gallery, her once perfectly manicured nails bitten to the quick. Her expensive handbag was gone, replaced by a canvas tote from the discount store where she now worked as a cashier. The other spectators in the gallery gave her a wide berth, as if her shame might be contagious. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Matthews entered the courtroom. She was known for her traditional values and zero tolerance for infidelity, a fact Tony's legal team had considered when filing in her district. Hayes versus Hayes, petition for divorce on grounds of adultery. Judge Matthews read from her docket. "Mr. Davidson, I understand you wish to contest the terms of the prenuptial agreement?" Davidson stood, adjusting his cheap tie. "Yes, Your Honor. We contend that the evidence against my client was obtained through illegal surveillance, making it inadmissible." "Objection, Your Honor." Patricia's voice cut through the courtroom like a steel blade. The surveillance was conducted on private property owned solely by Mr. Hayes, using security systems he had every right to install in his own home. Additionally, all digital evidence was obtained from devices purchased with Mr. Hayes' funds, as stipulated in the prenuptial agreement's property clauses. Judge Matthews reviewed the documents before her. Evidence of ownership? Patricia approached the bench with a thick folder. Receipt for every camera, every device, and every piece of surveillance equipment. Additionally, We have Mrs. Hayes' signed acknowledgement from the prenuptial agreement that all household and electronic devices purchased during the marriage would remain Mr. Hayes' sole property. But, Your Honor, Davidson protested, the extent of the surveillance was excessive and invasive. The extent, Patricia countered, was exactly what was needed to document Mrs. Hayes' systematic betrayal of her marriage vows, aided and abetted by her own daughter. Mary sank lower in her gallery seat as heads turned to stare at her. Furthermore, Patricia continued, we have documentation of Mrs. Hayes and Miss Hayes using Mr. Hayes' credit cards to fund their illicit activities. Hotel rooms, lingerie, gifts for Mrs. Hayes' companion. All purchased with Mr. Hayes' money, all detailed in our exhibits. Lisa leaned forward, whispering urgently to Davidson. He stood again, sweat visible on his forehead. Your Honor, my client is willing to accept some responsibility for her actions, but the punitive nature of Mr. Hayes' response. Punitive? Tony's voice carried clearly through the courtroom as he stood. You want to discuss punitive, counselor? Let's discuss how my wife and daughter turned my family into a mockery. How they laughed about deceiving me. Would you like to hear the recordings? Mr. Hayes, Judge Matthews warned, please address the court through your counsel. Apologies, Your Honor. Tony sat back down, but his eyes never left Lisa's face. She wouldn't meet his gaze. Patricia played selected audio clips from Tony's surveillance system. Lisa and Mary's voices filled the courtroom, their cruel laughter echoing off the wooden panels. He'll never find out. He's too busy working. Yeah, Dad's too boring for you, Mom. You need someone who knows how to have fun. Ryan definitely knows how to please a woman. Lisa's face crumpled as her own words condemned her. Mary began to cry silently in the gallery. Your Honor, Davidson tried again. Regardless of Mrs. Hayes' infidelity, the complete denial of alimony and division of marital assets seems extreme. Extreme? Patricia's voice dripped with contempt. Let's review the prenuptial agreement that Mrs. Hayes so eagerly signed when she married my client. She projected the document onto the courtroom screen, specific clauses highlighted. In the event of infidelity proven by clear and convincing evidence, the offending party forfeits all rights to marital assets and future support. Mrs. Hayes not only violated her marriage vows, Patricia continued, but conspired with her daughter to systematically deceive and mock my client while using his own resources to fund her affair. The prenuptial agreement is clear, and the evidence is overwhelming. Judge Matthews reviewed the documents carefully, her expression growing sterner with each page. Lisa's lawyer made several more attempts to argue, but each point was methodically demolished by Patricia's preparation and evidence. Your Honor, Lisa finally stood, her voice trembling. Please, I know I made mistakes, but 20 years of marriage has to count for something. I have no job, no money. You had a job, Tony interrupted, his voice carrying clearly despite its low volume. You lost it when your employer saw video evidence of you planning your liaisons during business hours. You had money. You spent it on hotel rooms with your boyfriend. You had a marriage. You threw it away for cheap thrills with a trainer half your age. Dad, please. Mary's voice broke as she stood in the gallery. Mom knows she was wrong. We both do. But you can't just throw us away. Miss Hayes, Judge Matthews warned, you are not a party to these proceedings. Please be seated. No, Your Honor, Tony stood again. Let my daughter speak. Let her explain to the court how she helped plan her mother's affair. How she used my credit cards to book hotel rooms. How she laughed while helping destroy her own family. Mary collapsed back into her seat, sobs shaking her shoulders as other spectators edged further away from her. Judge Matthews removed her glasses, surveying the courtroom with stern disapproval. I've seen thousands of divorce cases in this court. Infidelity, unfortunately, is not uncommon. But the level of calculated deception presented here, the involvement of a child in the betrayal of her own father, the mockery and abuse of trust. She shook her head. The evidence is clear, the prenuptial agreement is valid, and Mrs. Hayes' conduct is exactly the sort of behavior these agreements are designed to address. Lisa began to cry as the judge continued. The petition for divorce is granted. The terms of the prenuptial agreement will be enforced in full. Mrs. Hayes forfeits all claims to marital assets and future support. Mr. Hayes retains full ownership of all properties, accounts, and investments. Mrs. Hayes may collect her personal belongings from storage within 30 days. After that, they become Mr. Hayes's property as well. But, Your Honor, Davidson made one last attempt. Where is she supposed to go? How will she live? Judge Matthews's voice was steel. Mrs. Hayes should have considered these questions before violating her marriage vows in such a calculated and cruel manner. This court is not here to protect adults from the consequences of their own deliberate actions. You have 30 days to appeal, though given the evidence, I would advise against wasting your client's remaining funds on a futile effort. Court is adjourned. The bang of the gavel echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Lisa collapsed into her chair, mascara running down her cheeks. Mary rushed forward to comfort her mother, but Tony's voice stopped her cold. "Don't bother coming back to the house," he said, gathering his documents. "Your key cards have been deactivated, and security has orders to treat you both as trespassers." "Tony, please." Lisa reached for his arm as he passed. "Where are we supposed to go?" He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then met her eyes with a gaze that made her flinch and pull back. "That stopped being my concern the moment you and Mary decided to make a game of deceiving me. Enjoy your freedom. I hear Ryan's looking for a new place to stay too, though he might need help with the rent now that his training career is over." As Tony walked out of the courtroom, Lisa's sobs and Mary's pleas faded behind him. In construction, you learned that some structures couldn't be repaired. They needed to be demolished completely before something new could rise in their place. 3 months after the divorce, Tony stood at the window of his new penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The morning sun sparkled off the water, reflecting the success he'd built from the ashes of his former life. His phone buzzed with a message from his private investigator. The weekly update on Lisa's and Mary's situations. The attached photos showed Lisa leaving her new workplace, a small diner on the outskirts of Chicago. Her designer clothes were replaced by a polyester uniform, her carefully maintained appearance now showing the strain of long hours on her feet. The report noted she was working double shifts to afford her room at the Crystalline Motel, a far cry from the luxury she'd once taken for granted. Another photo showed Mary stocking shelves at a discount store, her university dreams replaced by minimum wage reality. Her social media accounts, once full of poolside selfies and expensive brunches, had gone dark after her former friends turned against her. The few who still spoke to her did so with mockery, sharing screenshots of her old, boastful posts about living her best life. Tony's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hayes? Detective Morrison is here to see you. Send him up." Tony straightened his tie, preparing for the meeting he'd been anticipating. Detective Morrison entered the penthouse, carrying a thick file. "Mr. Hayes, thought you want to know personally. We've closed the investigation into Ryan Blake's accident." "Accident?" Tony's voice carried just the right note of curiosity. 3 men jumped him outside his new apartment. Broken ribs, fractured jaw. Morrison's tone remained professional. "Unfortunately, Mr. Blake couldn't identify his attackers, and surveillance cameras in the area were malfunctioning that night." "How unfortunate." Tony poured 2 coffees, sliding one across his marble counter. "I trust the case is closed?" "Completely." Morrison sipped his coffee. "Though it's interesting, similar accidents seem to happen whenever Blake tries to find work at a new gym. Must be very clumsy." Tony allowed himself a small smile. The detective had been generously compensated to ensure Ryan's accidents remained unsolved. Life can be dangerous for men who don't respect boundaries. Speaking of boundaries, Morrison set down his cup. "Your ex-wife was spotted near your office building yesterday." "I know." Tony pulled up his security feed on a tablet. "She waited outside for 3 hours, probably hoping to beg for money again." The footage showed Lisa, dressed in clothes that had once been fashionable, but now showed wear, pacing near the building's entrance. Security had been instructed to treat her as a trespasser, but Tony had wanted to see how far she'd fallen. His phone lit up with a text from Mary. "Dad, please. Mom's sick. We can barely afford food. I'm working 2 jobs, but it's not enough. We need help." Tony deleted the message without responding. Through his surveillance network, he could see Mary leaving her shift at the discount store, only to start another job at a fast food restaurant. Her designer handbags had been sold months ago on consignment, her credit score destroyed by unpaid student loans. One more thing. Morrison pulled a final photo from his file. Your ex-wife tried to contact Ryan Blake last week. The photo showed Lisa waiting outside a rundown gym where Ryan had found work as a janitor. The only job he could get after Tony's campaign had destroyed his reputation as a trainer. The report noted their conversation. Lisa, Ryan, please. You have to help us. We have nothing left. Ryan, are you crazy? Stay away from me. Every time I try to start over, Hayes' guys find me. I can't even get a job washing towels without something happening. Just leave me alone. Tony nodded, satisfied. The man who'd thought he could destroy Tony's family was now scrubbing toilets and looking over his shoulder, knowing each day might bring another accident. Well, Morrison stood, straightening his jacket. I should get back to more pressing cases, though I doubt we'll have any more incidents to discuss regarding Mr. Blake. He seems to have learned his lesson. After the detective left, Tony returned to his window view. His phone buzzed again. Lisa had left a voicemail. Tony, please. I'm begging you. Mary's working herself, sick trying to support us both. I know what we did was wrong, but this punishment, it's too much. We're sleeping in a motel room with roaches. My uniform still smells like grease no matter how many times I wash it. Just talk to us. Please. He deleted the message, unmoved by the desperation in her voice. On his tablet, he pulled up the feed from his old house's security cameras. The new landscaping was coming along nicely. He'd had all of Lisa's flower beds torn out and replaced with a modern design that better suited his taste. That a notification popped up from his real estate agent. Offer accepted on the River North condo. Perfect for entertaining, as discussed. Tony smiled, thinking of Amanda, the corporate lawyer he'd been seeing. Unlike Lisa, she understood ambition and loyalty. She'd been particularly impressed by how he'd handled the divorce. Admiring his strategic thinking and unwavering resolve, his phone buzzed one final time. Mary again. Dad, I saw you today. You walked right past me while I was stocking shelves. Didn't even look at me. How can you be so cold? I'm your daughter. Tony typed his response carefully. No, you gave up that right when you helped destroy our family. You made your choice. Live with it. He turned back to his view of the lake, remembering all the times Mary had mocked him, all the times Lisa had sneered at his work ethic. Now they understood exactly what that work ethic had built and what it could take away. Another message from his PI appeared. Subject L spotted collecting cans for recycling money behind her workplace. Subject M seen crying in her car between shifts. Required surveillance photos attached. Tony opened the photos, each one documenting his ex-wife and daughter's fall from privilege. Lisa, once proud of her expensive manicures, now had hands roughened by dishwater and cleaning supplies. Mary, who used to mock his boring life, spent her days facing the same tedium she'd once despised. With none of the rewards, the sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting his penthouse in shades of gold. Tony opened his laptop, reviewing plans for his newest construction project, a luxury development that would reshape the Chicago skyline. He'd lost his family, but he'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that no one would ever mistake his kindness for weakness again. Below his window, he spotted Lisa's familiar figure hurrying toward her evening shift, her head down to avoid the stares of people who remembered her from better days. Mary would be starting her night job soon, serving fast food to the same wealthy students who'd once been her classmates. Tony turned away from the window, focusing on his blueprints. In construction, you learned that the best foundations were built on solid rock, not shifting sand. His ex-wife and daughter had built their lives on lies and betrayal. Now they were learning the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes rock bottom has a basement. 6 months after the divorce, Tony Hayes stood at the podium of Chicago's most prestigious business conference, accepting the Developer of the Year award. His latest project, a 60-story luxury tower on Michigan Avenue, had transformed the city's skyline and doubled his company's value. Success isn't just about building structures, he told the assembled crowd of Chicago's elite. It's about building them on solid foundations, about knowing which materials will stand the test of time and which will crumble under pressure. In the audience, Amanda Reynolds watched with admiration. The corporate lawyer had been dating Tony for 3 months, drawn to his strength and unwavering principles. Unlike Lisa, she'd built her own success. Understanding the value of loyalty and hard work after his speech, Tony mingled with Chicago's power players, discussing future projects and potential investments. His phone buzzed with a text from his head of security, subject spotted at North and Wells. Require instructions? Tony opened the attached photo. Lisa and Mary stood outside a convenience store, counting loose change to buy basic supplies. Their faces were drawn, their clothes shabby. 6 months of working minimum wage jobs had stripped away their artificial glamour, revealing the hollow shells beneath. Maintain surveillance only, Tony replied. No intervention needed. Tony? Amanda touched his arm, her professional demeanor a sharp contrast to Lisa's former frivolity. The mayor wants to discuss the Riverside Development Project. He smiled, leading her toward the city officials gathered nearby. This was his world, now one of power, respect, and real achievement. Let Lisa and Mary count their pennies for dinner. He had empires to build. Later that evening, Tony and Amanda dined at Gibson's, Chicago's finest steakhouse. Through the window, he spotted a familiar figure hurrying past, wearing a fast food uniform. Mary didn't see them, too focused on reaching her night shift on time. Isn't that your... Amanda began. No. Tony cut her off smoothly. Just someone who made poor choices. His phone lit up with another message from security. Subject L attempted to access Old Country Club membership. Claims she's still Mrs. Hayes. Removed from premises. Tony showed Amanda the message, and she nodded approvingly. The entitlement of some people, she said, thinking they can just take what they haven't earned. Speaking of earning, Tony raised his wine glass. Congratulations on making partner at your firm. Amanda beamed. Unlike Lisa's shallow pride in her appearance, Amanda's pride came from achievement. She understood ambition, strategy, and consequences, everything his ex-wife and daughter had mocked after dinner. They drove past the motel where Lisa and Mary now lived. Through his surveillance network, Tony could see them in their cramped room, eating microwave noodles while watching old videos of their former life on Mary's cracked phone screen. Dad looks so boring in these old clips. Mary's voice carried through his surveillance feed. How did we not see what he was really capable of? We saw what we wanted to see, Lisa replied, her voice bitter. We thought we were so clever, living our best lives. Now look at us. Ryan won't even answer my texts anymore, Mary complained. Nobody will. All my old friends act like I'm invisible when I serve them at the drive-thru. At least you're young enough to start over somewhere, Lisa sighed. I'm almost 40, working as a waitress, living in a motel room with my daughter. Some best life. Tony switched off the feed. Their regrets meant nothing to him now. In construction, you learned that some materials were fundamentally flawed. No amount of reinforcement could make them trustworthy again. His phone buzzed with an update from Miles. Ryan Blake spotted leaving Chicago. Bus ticket to Detroit. Apparently, too many accidents convinced him to try his luck elsewhere. Good riddance, Tony muttered, turning on a lakeshore drive. His new penthouse loomed ahead, its lights reflecting off Lake Michigan like a crown of success inside. Amanda admired the view while Tony checked his emails. Another message from Mary appeared. Dad, I saw you at Gibson's tonight. You looked right through me like I was nothing. Mom's health is getting worse from working double shifts. Please, we've learned our lesson. We'll do anything to make it right. Tony's response was swift and final. There is no making it right. You chose your path. I chose mine. The only difference is I chose better. He deleted the email and joined Amanda on the balcony. Below them, Chicago sparkled like a field of stars, each light representing opportunities and achievements that Lisa and Mary would never touch again. You know, Amanda said, sipping her wine, some people might think your response to their betrayal was harsh. Some people never learn that actions have consequences, Tony replied. In my business, you learn quickly that weakness isn't kindness and mercy isn't strength. His phone buzzed one final time, a photo from his security team. Lisa and Mary were digging through the dumpster behind their motel, salvaging discarded food because they couldn't afford groceries. Their designer purses were long gone, their manicured nails broken, their carefully maintained appearances reduced to shadows of their former selves. Tony smiled, putting his phone away. Let them dig through garbage. Let them work their fingers raw for minimum wage. Let them feel the weight of every cruel joke, every mocking laugh, every moment they'd spent deceiving the man who'd given them everything, that he wrapped an arm around Amanda, gazing out at his city. In construction, the most satisfying projects were the ones that transformed the landscape completely, leaving no trace of what stood before. His ex-wife and daughter had thought they could treat him like a foundation to be used and mocked instead. They'd learned the hardest lesson of all. The man they'd dismissed as boring and predictable had been strong enough to build an empire and ruthless enough to destroy their world without hesitation or regret. To new beginnings, he toasted, clinking his glass against Amanda's. Below, Lisa and Mary trudged back to their motel room, carrying their salvage dinner, forever locked out of the life they'd thrown away. Their punishment would continue as long as Tony deemed necessary, which, given his unforgiving nature, meant forever justice, like the best revenge, was a dish best served cold. And Tony Hayes had served it frozen.
Story 4.
Steve Johnson stationed himself outside his wife's office at 7 p.m., intending to terminate the charade they dubbed marriage. Some husbands overlook the signs over time, especially when their wives have never worked late before. Steve took notice and decided to address the issue. He approximated that this had been transpiring for 2 months, pinpointing the moment he observed his wife, Angela, wearing red high-heeled shoes to work. Angela despised heels, reserving them for rare weddings or special occasions, particularly in the bedroom where she paired them with red heels, white stockings, a cute lace bra, and thong underwear. Steve cherished the white thigh-high stockings and believed they had a fantastic love life. However, Angela never wore high heels to work, which prompted Steve to inquire about the change. He asked if something was going on, and she explained that she had a meeting with her boss and wanted to look professional. Angela paused briefly and continued walking without turning around. Steve remained silent, contemplating her choice and wondering if it resembled that of a professional, yet remained discreet. The revelation unfolded over time. Initially, it was an occasional hour, but later it escalated to 2 or 3 hours several days a week. Steve realized the truth when Angela attended a bachelorette party, detesting clubs, salons, and bars, preferring dinner or coffee. She disapproved of drinking and looked down on those who indulged. Following her to a third bachelorette party at her boss Martin Schindler's house in Glen Ellen, Steve recognized the location from past gatherings. Waiting an hour to confirm her intentions, he then deflated all 4 tires and returned home. Angela omitted the tire incident but recounted it to their daughter, Jenny, expressing relief that someone merely released the air. Jenny questioned its veracity, and Angela affirmed, grateful they weren't cut, using an air pump Steve insisted she keep in the trunk. Angela admitted to a night at a dance club with friends and suggested avoiding it in the future. Steve consulted a lawyer, initiating the divorce process, leading him to sit in his car near her office, awaiting her impending service. Despite lamenting 21 years of marriage, they produced their 17-year-old daughter, Jenny, Steve's pride and joy. They initially met when Angela, a receptionist aspiring to become a paralegal, assisted Steve with a contract dispute. Dating blissfully for 2 years, they married, and Steve believed in the happiness of their marriage until Angela started working for Martin Schindler. Despite Steve's truck driving job with long hours, they maximized family time, embarking on weekend trips according to Jenny's schedule, filled with sports or other engaging activities. They explored Galena, Illinois, for wineries, and Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, for shopping and relaxation. Angela's betrayal, unnoticed until the revelation of her choice in footwear, severed their connection. As Angela distanced herself, Steve, previously unaware of her infidelity, observed a decline in her demeanor. He recalled the night he trailed her and initiated a conversation. "Why not have dinner and catch a movie today? I have a rare day off on Friday and I'd like to spend time with you," he proposed. She replied, "You know the deal. Fridays are for my girls. They depend on me as their designated driver. Let them manage for one night. With your extended work hours and those nights with the girls, I barely see you. If you had a genuine job that didn't require driving at all hours, we could spend more time together. But you don't. I've endured it for 2 decades. Deal with it. See you later." Without saying goodbye, she left, leaving him speechless. Following her into the garage, he witnessed her departure, grabbed the keys, and hastily followed. Their area had a single exit, involving a maze of streets to reach the exit of their house. Catching up with her on Main Street, he trailed her to Martin's house. He avoided her for the rest of the weekend, deciding to consult a lawyer on Monday. He wasn't seeking a scorched earth approach. He simply wanted a peaceful end to their marriage. Feeling through her words and actions that she no longer desired him, he questioned holding on to the slippery rope. He believed she could have her boss without a fight on his part. He shared this sentiment with his daughter that Monday, disclosing that she was involved with her boss and expressing his belief that she was cheating on him. His daughter, referring to him as Pumpkin, acknowledged the information, stating that she may not have noticed a difference in the last couple of months, but he did. "No way, Daddy, I don't believe it. I followed her to his house. She claimed she was going out with friends, but that's not true. She went straight to her boss's house, but her tires were damaged at the club." "No, honey, I did it. Right outside her boyfriend's house, when I realized she wasn't heading to the club. It's hard to believe, Dad." "Me too, but it's true." His daughter sat beside him in the car, anticipating the inevitable fireworks. "Are you sure, Dad? No chance?" Jenny asked. "No, Pumpkin, it's over. She broke my trust and tore my heart. I can't tolerate such betrayal. Even if she had a reason, there's no justification for a prolonged affair. What if she got drunk and it happened just once? Maybe if she'd been assaulted, it would be different. No, she chose this path. She betrayed my trust. Trust is crucial with someone you can never love, someone you can't trust. I could never love someone who betrayed me like that. Our marriage fell apart." Jenny glimpsed two men approaching the car from the window. "What a fool," Angela Johnson remarked, looking out of their law office window engaged with Martin. She was relieved the office had gold-tinted windows. "I can't believe it. He thought he'd smack me to it. There was no love there. It was animalistic in every way. It took him 6 months to attract Angela, grooming her to replace his wife, who just finalized their 19-year marriage's divorce. He was fed up with his ex-wife's complaints, weight gain, and lack of desire. Embarrassed to be seen with her, he finally broke free when his twins left for college." Angela, the same age as his wife, exuded greater elegance. Possessing the toned physique of a 30-year-old, she radiated astonishing beauty. Martin had already upgraded her wardrobe, envisioning her as an exemplary boss's wife. A knock on the window startled Steve. "Are you Stephen Johnson?" Rolling down the window, he confirmed, "Yes, you've been served. Please read the documents carefully. There is a restraining order requiring you to stay 100 meters away from Angela Johnson, Jennifer Johnson, and your family residence." "What injunction from Jenny?" Jenny grabbed the envelope, reading the divorce headline. She discovered a restraining order and handed it to him. "What the hell?" he shouted. "Oh God, no," Jenny moaned. "Daddy, I swear I didn't know." "What are you talking about?" She handed him the remaining papers. The documentation outlined several allegations: spousal violence, child misuse, aggravation of a minor. "Jenny, why?" "Dad, I swear I had nothing to do with this. This is a lie or a mistake." "Wait, how did she know I'd be here right now?" "That's because I told her." His daughter's admission shattered his heart. "When you told me she was cheating on you, I confronted her. She told me she only did it because she had an investigator's report stating you cheated on her. You can't be serious, can you? Have you seen the report?" "No. You believed her and not me? Did you let her set me up? Baby, why? I love you so much. Why did you do this to me? I asked you not to say anything. I swear, Dad, I didn't know about the restraining order. This misuse is nonsense. I swear I didn't say anything like that to anyone." He cried quietly, not paying attention to her. "Please." A moment later, he said, "You have to leave now, Jenny. I can't and don't want to be within 100 yards of you anymore," he said quietly. "Dad, no!" she screamed. "Go or I might get arrested. On top of all this, the sheriff is still here watching me." Reading further, he said, "Oh my God, they also froze all my accounts. Crap. What should I do now? Congratulations to you both. You destroyed me. I can't even afford to fight her damn powerful law firm with all these bogus claims. I will forever fight in court. Oh God, no. I'll fix everything, Daddy, she said, getting out of the car and heading toward the office building. Martin and Angela concluded their activities and sighed contentedly. It was great, darling, she said. I just wish I had binoculars so I could see his face. As Martin fastened his belt and Angela smoothed out her dress, Jenny stormed into the office screaming, "You're a witch! Child misuse, aggravation! What is wrong with you?" Jenny screamed. I should have had the advantage, Angela said. I should have struck first. Now he cannot enter the house or access our money for some time. Now I have the upper hand over him. He didn't insult me. I don't know this for sure. You guys are really close, Angela said with a grin. Jenny approached her and asked, He didn't cheat, did he? Of course not. Who needs it? She said with a laugh. You're a monster, Jenny said, and punched her mother in the face with all her might. Angela collapsed to the ground in shock and pain. Martin laughed and said, Nice shot, girl. Jenny froze, then looked around. She saw bookcases, shelves, and a dirty desk. She grimaced in disgust, looked at Martin, and swept everything off the table. Then Jenny looked at him and calmly said, You'd better never cross paths with me again, idiot. I can and will hurt you. And she left. Jenny, wait! Damn it! Angela screamed. Martin said, That little brat will pay for this. On her way out, she passed a man with an envelope in his hand, who asked her, Are you Angela Johnson? There, she said, and rushed away. Both Angela and Martin laughed at the fact that she was served with Steve's divorce petition. Jenny desperately tried to talk to her father out of fear he knew he couldn't talk to her, so he didn't answer and cried every time he saw her call. He was afraid that Angela would find out and send the police after him for violating the restraining order. Angela had already alienated him from all their friends, and only his parents and brother believed in his innocence. His sister-in-law kept him away from his niece and nephew just in case it was true. This almost shattered her brother's marriage with George before Jenny compelled her to reveal the truth. He couldn't fathom what he'd done to merit such animosity from Angela and the betrayal of his daughter. Even without knowledge of the misuse charge, she informed her mother that he was aware of her affair and the impending service. She falsely claimed she intended to stand by him during Angela's service but stayed silent, knowing he would be served. Jenny sought assistance for her dad, discovering her mother's divorce papers showed the lawyer worked in her mother's office, making it impossible to approach him. She reached out to Grandpa George, hoping for help. What do you need, young lady? Inquired her grandfather. We have to help Dad. I don't know who to turn to. I can't believe what you did to your father, Jenny. What were you thinking, helping your mother? Grandfather, it's all a lie. I didn't do anything. It's all my mom and her lawyer guy. Watch your tongue, girl. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I swear I didn't blame him for any of this. I had no idea confronting her would lead to that explosion. Fine, I'll see what I can do. Grandfather, is he there? Can I talk to him? He can't have any contact until this order is lifted. Every call makes him cry, fearing your mother will find out and involve the police. His lawyer set a court date for the hearing, but nothing can be done until then. Jenny, in tears, said, Grandpa, tell him I love him and miss him. I'll convey the message if I see him. Jenny hung up and cried for minutes. When she composed herself, she entered her mother's room, tossing her underwear and new clothes down the stairs. Carrying a heap of clothes outside, she threw them in the front yard. Some outfits still had tags. Screw you, Mom, she said and fetched lighter fluid from the barn. Pouring it on her clothes, she lit them with matches. Realizing her mother would return soon, Jenny sat in a lawn chair roasting marshmallows over the burning clothes. Angela, pulling into the driveway, saw Jenny and screamed, demanding an explanation. No, Mom, I've lost my mind. I decided to make you pay for the days Dad can't talk to me. Destroying more of your things will follow unless you retract this misuse claim. If you touch me, I'll report your misuse, and also let everyone know your boyfriend asked me to show my underwear. Don't worry, Mom. Things will turn into smoke until I talk to him. Damn it! Angela exclaimed as she entered the house. She dialed Steve, but, as expected, he ignored the call and deleted the message unheard. Shortly afterward, a fire truck and police car arrived in response to a neighbor's fire report. A policeman and a firefighter approached Jenny. "What's happening here, young lady?" inquired the officer. "My mom wanted to discard clothes she'd outgrown and told me to burn them at the stake," Jenny explained. "Apparently you can't have a fire in the front yard." "Is your mother home?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I'll use a hose to put it out if you want," a fireman offered. "Did you use anything to light it, or did you just set the clothes on fire?" "A whole can of lighter fluid," she proudly admitted. "We don't have water, but we've got some sand. I'll fetch it," the fireman said. While he dealt with the fire, the policeman rang the doorbell. Angela, prepared to confront her daughter, realized it was the police. "We'll handle the fire. It's not a big deal, officer," Angela said before he could speak. "Ma'am, did you know it's against city ordinance to have an uncontrolled fire in your yard?" "No, I didn't," she retorted through clenched teeth. "Here's your fine, just pay it. No court appearances required. Next time, ma'am, consider donating unwanted clothes to Goodwill. Less fortunate people could use them." She closed the door. Angela's lawyer attended a restraining order hearing the following Monday, choosing not to renew it, aware it was falsely obtained. It served its purpose, buying time and tarnishing Steve's reputation. Steve's lawyer sought charges against Angela for perjury. The judge, lacking conclusive evidence of false pretenses, dismissed the perjury claim. Though the restraining order was lifted, it offered little comfort to Steve, deeply depressed by false accusations, frozen assets, spousal betrayal, and most painfully, his daughter's betrayal. Struggling to make ends meet, he took leave from work, battled drinks, and lived in misery. In the afternoon, when Angela and Jenny were absent, Steve visited his house. Despite changed locks, the garage door opened. He found his belongings in boxes and garbage bags, noticing Angela had left the wedding album and family photographs. He maintained contact with his family, though strained due to his problems. Despite his parents urging him to see a psychiatrist, he refused, feeling he didn't need one to confirm his miserable life. Angela's law firm waged a merciless campaign, informing his employer about the restraining order and misuse allegations, resulting in Steve's termination. His contract's moral clause, meant to address such situations, might have been contested if he were in a better state of mind, but at that moment, he felt powerless to act. Steve's residence remained a mystery, with communication limited to telephone exchanges with his family. The sole glimpse of him occurred during mandatory court appearances for his divorce, where he interacted solely with his lawyer and the judge. Jenny attempted to engage him during such instances, and each time he passed by without acknowledgement, resembling the walking dead in her eyes. Angela reveled in the unfolding events, harboring resentment toward Steve long before Martin influenced her. Throughout her manipulative endeavors, her sentiments evolved into near hatred. After prolonged legal battles, the divorce concluded. Steve reclaimed his share of assets, successfully sold the house with his lawyer's assistance, and retained ownership of his truck. However, false rumors circulating about child misuse hindered his job search in town, despite lacking any accusations. Opting for a fresh start, Steve moved to Chicago, securing employment as a truck driver. Loading his belongings into the pickup, he bid farewell to his parents when Jenny arrived. "Dad, I'm so sorry. None of this should have happened," she expressed, running up to hug him. He cried without reciprocating. "You chose your mother without evidence, and the dominoes fell. I had to file first to catch her off guard. Now you understand why." "Daddy, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm leaving now. This false accusation of child aggravation just won't go away once you're accused of something like that. It's a stink you just can't wash off. Someday your mother and her lover will pay for this. Goodbye, Jennifer. I loved you more than my own life." As her grandmother hugged Jenny, he seized the opportunity to get into the truck and drive away. "Angela, will you marry me?" Martin proposed on the day the divorce finalized. "Yes, Martin, oh yeah," she cried and hugged him, causing a scene in the restaurant. "Let's go to your house and celebrate," she suggested after settling the bill. Eager to move in and remodel Martin's big house, Angela planned to discard the tacky furniture and curtains chosen by his ex-wife. Their first purchase would be a new bedroom set. As they left, Martin laughed at the sight of his ex-wife, Carol, having dinner with her parents. Carol, disgusted with him and his latest mistress, spat at him as they passed by, but he paid no attention. Steve entered the truck warehouse and spotted his colleague Lou at the doorway. "Steve, what's up, dude? You look like someone spoiled your oatmeal." "Divorce is finalized today." Well, after what that woman did to you, you deserve to have some fun today." "It's not her, it's my daughter. She took her side and I just can't handle it. She calls and emails me, but I can't bring myself to talk to her. Maybe I should see a psychiatrist." "Perhaps you should let off some steam," a voice chimed in from behind them. "Hello, Mariana." "That's not a bad idea," Lou added. "Ha, who needs my dried-out old self?" Steve remarked. Marianne leaned over, whispering words of affection to him, and then gracefully walked away, leaving the onlookers admiring her as she departed. Encouraged by his friends, Steve expressed his readiness to pursue Marianne, stating that she was his new partner and they should hit the road. Their initial date included dinner, a movie, and a visit to Baker Square for coffee and cake. Marianne reassured Steve, mentioning that he was a good guy going through a rough patch and that everything would work out. Reflecting on his past, Steve shared with Marianne that, for a long time, he couldn't fathom what he did wrong and couldn't understand his ex-wife's aggression during the divorce. He expressed that she was terrible, but it was all over now. Holding her hand, he advised her to look forward, not behind, and promised to make it worth her while. With a smile, he squeezed her hand and suggested they go, while Marianne pulled him in for a kiss upon their exit. She then proposed if he wanted to see her bedroom. Steve regretfully replied that he wished he could. However, Marianne, undeterred, took his hand, leading him to her bedroom. Bathed in the soothing bluish tint of moonlight, they kissed and undressed slowly, intending to savor every moment. Marianne eventually lay on the bed, and Steve knelt on the floor. Expressing his perspective, he remarked that her loss was his gain, and he intended to take advantage of it. He kissed her, mentioning that he was available any time. A week or so later, a man dressed in black approached the back door of a posh house in town. Expecting to break in, he smiled when he found it unlocked. Stealthily navigating through the house, he reached the room he sought. The room was well equipped, thanks to a Facebook photo of his target sitting at his desk. The arrogant man had it as his screensaver. The closet was behind and to the right of the desk, with the room dimly lit by a desk lamp. Though the closet door was closed, he could still see the room well. Opening the door behind the counter, he waited. The only concern was the target approaching the closet before sitting down. It might complicate things, but he remained confident the job would be done, with a perfect alibi ensuring his safety. Martin Schindler entered his home office, glancing at the computer monitor angled on his desk, with his back turned to the cabinet. The uninvited guest cautiously opened the closet door and stealthily slipped away. Upon hearing the noise, Martin looked up and discovered a weapon pressed to his head, followed by the pulling of the trigger. Subsequently, the pistol was placed in his hand, and a note was left on the table that simply stated, "Price paid in full." The shooter swiftly exited the door after leaving the note. Upon returning home from the store, Angela entered Martin's office to share the new bedding she had purchased. She screamed at the sight of his lifeless body in the chair and immediately retrieved her cell phone to call emergency. While observing the weapon in his hand with a note on the table, she refrained from touching it. Reading the message, she received a shocking revelation. "No, Steve, no." In distress, she screamed, questioning, "What have you done?" Detective Devontae Jordan received a call and hurried to the Schindlers' home. On arrival, he saw a weeping woman in the living room, with crime scene investigators moving around the office. While scanning the scene, he noticed a new set of golf clubs in the corner and commented, "Good clubs indeed." Continuing his examination, he observed the weapon still held in the sufferer's right hand. Asking one of the first responding officers, he inquired about the current situation, learning that it was an apparent self-inflicted weapon shot to the head. The sufferer was lawyer Martin Schindler, a homeowner, with Angela Johnson as the bride who found the body and called emergency. There was a typed note on a computer, unsigned, consisting of just one sentence. Detective Jordan handed a plastic bag with the note, frowned, and questioned Angela about its meaning. Angela clarified it wasn't self-destruction. Her ex-husband, Steve, eliminated him. Martin disliked weapons and didn't own such a firearm. Angela believed Steve did it because he felt Martin took her away. She admitted to dating the deceased while married. Detective Jordan considered potential motives, including resentment from Martin's ex-wife, who might have been angry about being left. Angela provided an alibi for her whereabouts, assuring the detective. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Detective Jordan visited Steve Johnson, asking about his whereabouts the previous night. Steve explained he was driving a rig through Rockford, arriving at the station at 9:30 p.m. Detective Jordan informed him of Martin's apparent self-destruction, hinting at inconsistencies. Steve offered additional information, providing his new mobile number for future contact. As Detective Jordan left, he contemplated the oddities surrounding the self-destruction, such as a left-handed person shooting himself with his right hand, typing the note, and the scarcity of weapons marks on his hand. These anomalies troubled him as he prepared for further investigations across Chicago. After the detective departed, Steve took a seat at his kitchen table when Lou asked him what all of it meant. Steve chuckled, remarking that he couldn't believe his ex-fiancée had committed self-destruction. Lou expressed his hope that his alibi checked out. They laughed and clinked beer bottles in a toast. Angela, seated in the front row at the funeral, mourned the man who effortlessly took her from her wonderful husband. Tears flowed for the man who persuaded her to participate in a nuclear attack and execute a good man for change. She was deeply in love with her truck driver husband until she transferred to work for Martin. He targeted her, immediately wearing her down with snide comments about truck drivers and flippant remarks about him during trips. It was too easy for Martin. He planted a seed she had neglected due to Steve's long days and sometimes nights on the road, and it grew. Angela couldn't decide if she cried for her fiancé's loss or her husband's and the breakdown with her daughter. It all seemed like a waste of time. She didn't hear or care if the room buzzed around her. She didn't notice the looks Martin's ex-wife and daughters gave her. They blamed her for his pass away. "You could come to the funeral and pay your respects," Angela said, approaching her daughter, home for the weekend from college. Jenny looked at her intently and said, "How dare you tell me I should respect the man who destroyed my father? Forget you! I shouldn't even call that piece of garbage a man." She slammed the door as she left the house, taking the long drive back to college in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Detective Jordan sat in a meeting with his boss discussing the lack of progress in the case. All the suspects' alibis are verified. Steve Johnson's truck tracker shows no stops on his way from Madison to Chicago, and the timing was correct. The warehouse team identified him as the driver. Angela Johnson's receipts and surveillance place her at Macy's, Victoria's Secret, and Starbucks, as the medical examiner's window showed. At the time of her pass away, Schindler's ex-wife and daughters had dinner with her parents, brother, and sister-in-law in honor of her birthday, said Jordan. "Was it your ex's birthday?" the commander asked him. "No, they were just celebrating it. Heck, I even checked on Johnson's daughter, and she was at college over 3 hours away in Wisconsin. Is there a chance it was self-destruction?" the commander asked him. "It's possible. It just seems to me that it's not true. Well, with no suspects, no motive, and no concrete evidence that it was even a slaughter, let's close it as a self-destruction." Jordan nodded and left the room, upset. 6 months later, Angela invited Jason Davis to dinner. It was their third date, and Angela got him into bed. After a passionate night, Jason went home. He opened a bottle of beer before going to bed and sat down to check his email. As he sat at the kitchen table, a weapon was pointed at his head and fired. They put a weapon in his hand and left a note. "The price has been paid in full." Detective Jordan walked through the apartment and into the kitchen. Before he could speak, He was handed a self-destruction note. Well, damn, it looks like I was right about something else. Now I just need to find out who the hell did this, he told the officer. Any fingerprints, Mark? He inquired of the technician. Yes, but if I had to guess right now, I would say they are the sufferers. Are there any witnesses who called the police? Jordan asked. A neighbor heard the shot and called emergency. No one saw anyone enter or leave? Of course not. How did they get here? No broken locks or windows? It looks like a balcony to me. The sliding door was not locked. The sufferer probably wasn't worried about this since he was on the second floor. Although it wouldn't be that difficult to climb up. I would say that anyone of fairly average height could jump, reach the bottom, and pull themselves up. Average height for a man or a woman? Average man, tall woman. Where is this guy's phone number? Jordan asked. Packed, here. Jordan used his gloved hands to find the last call on his phone. Just had to check. The last call was made to Angela. I'll be shocked if she's not Angela Johnson. After the usual condolences and pleasantries, the detective got to work. He inquired of Miss Johnson why her lovers seemed inclined towards self-destruction. Miss Johnson responded that she believed it was Steve who was punishing her and confirmed she had been at home all night, with her alarm system serving as verification. She explained that the alarm system detected doors and windows opening and that she had activated it when Jason left the previous night, deactivating it only upon the detective's arrival that morning. She affirmed that the system had remained on throughout the night. When asked about her theory implicating her husband in the apparent self-destructions, she maintained her belief, stating she couldn't imagine anyone else being responsible. The detective queried about her last communication with her husband before the divorce, any signs of him following or contacting her, to which she responded negatively. She remained convinced it must be him, despite lacking evidence. After concluding his questioning, the detective asked about her height out of curiosity and offered condolences once again before leaving, requesting her to remain nearby for further inquiries. Is it the same note the chief asked when Jordan returned to the police station? Yes, sir, Detective Jordan said. Inform me daily about your progress. This is too much for a coincidence. The woman's alibi is reliable. I'll see if I can ruin it. But we'll see. I'm going to see her ex-husband now, the detective said cautiously. Then let me know what you get. As Detective Jordan left, he had a bad feeling that all of the prime suspects' alibis would be as reliable as the last time. Steve and Marianne were cozy on his couch watching Jack Ryan on Prime when the doorbell rang. Detective Jordan, what can I do for you today? Steve asked, gesturing for him to come in. Sir, where were you last night at 1:30 a.m.? On the way back from Detroit? I arrived at 230. What happened this time? Do you know Jason Davis? I don't think that's true. He met with your ex-wife. Looks like he shot himself last night. No freaking way. Looks like, huh? Maybe she's a liquidator, a black widow, or something like that. Maybe. Thank you. If I need anything else, I will contact you. Steve laughed as he closed the door. What was all that, baby? Marianne inquired. It looks like another of my ex-wife's boyfriends has died. Oh, God, she breathed, raising her hand to her mouth. Yeah, thank God I have an alibi. I hope whoever executes idiots keeps choosing times when I'm on the road. Steve's cell phone rang. He looked and saw it was Jenny, so he ignored it. Marianne frowned and said, Will she never have a chance? I don't understand why I need this. She misses you. She turned to me and we talked. What? He shouted, standing up. She reassured him, urging him to relax, emphasizing that she wouldn't intervene in his decision and that ultimately he had to live with it. She mentioned that his ex-friend still followed him on Facebook, having seen a recent tag at a sushi place and expressing happiness for him. She informed him that his ex-friend texted her to inquire about him regularly and expressed a persistent desire to communicate with him. She recounted how his ex-friend called her weekly for casual conversations, showing interest in his activities and whereabouts. She described how his ex-friend admired her control over his schedule and appreciated the assurance that he would always be home when needed. She reminisced about their discussions regarding his travels and experiences on the road since childhood, including early morning returns and shared breakfasts filled with tales of his trips. He sighed, recalling these memories fondly. "Marianne, I love you, but please stay away from this." She hugged him and said, "I'm not involved in this. I will never drag you into anything. Everything depends on you." I told her straight out that I wouldn't put you two together. He nodded, hugged her tightly, and stopped the show. "I just don't have anything that could put her at the crime scene, Chief. In fact, there is no evidence that anyone was at the crime scene. No forced entry, no finger or toe marks, and no discrepancies in spatter patterns. If it weren't for the identical notes, I would have closed them both as self-destruction." Jordan informed his boss about the ex's alibi, to which the commander inquired if it was tightly secured. Jordan likened it to a nuclear reactor. Later, they discussed Schindler's ex-wife's whereabouts, noting she was seen on CCTV at a club with her new partner while her children were at school. 2 years afterward, Angela shifted her dating habits, deciding to avoid dating men repeatedly after incidents of self-destruction. However, she continued engaging in casual encounters, but reconsidered after contracting an STD. Wanting to settle down, she began dating Lance Forrest. After a month, their relationship became public, though some considered her approach careless. Unfortunately, Lance was fatally shot while watching a ball game at home. The weapon was discovered in his hand along with the same note as before. He answered his cell phone and was greeted by Detective Stan Anson from Schaumburg. Anson asked if there were any unsolved cases that might be connected to his. Jordan confirmed there was one related to fully paid self-destructions. Anson mentioned he had such a case, which surprised Jordan. Anson asked about any connections to Angela Johnson, who was revealed to be the deceased's girlfriend. Jordan inquired about Angela's ex-husband's alibi, which Anson confirmed was solid, as he was passing through Madison at the time. Anson stated Angela was alone at home, her security system providing an alibi last time. This time, Angela had ordered Chinese food, delivered within 30 minutes. The shooting occurred during this time frame, according to a neighbor's emergency call. Despite the proximity of Angela's house to the deceased's apartment, they couldn't see how she could have committed the crime within that window. Jordan agreed with the assessment. They decided to meet the next day to compare files. However, despite their efforts, all alibis remained unbroken, and no new suspects emerged, leaving the cases unsolved. Steve and Marianne sat in the Great Hall watching Jenny as she walked across the stage to receive her bachelor's degree. Steve beamed with pride and had to wipe away the tear that threatened to roll down his cheek. Marianne tightly squeezed his hand and kissed it. After the ceremony, as they headed to their car, Marianne expressed her desire for him to call someone he loved very much. He declined, explaining that the person had chosen to side with her mother rather than him, and only regretted it later when she felt guilty about her mother's actions towards him. He felt betrayed by her lack of support, and emphasized the repercussions it had on his life. Marianne acknowledged his feelings. He reiterated that the person had made their choice, and they all had to accept it. Marianne frowned at his resolve, holding his hand and questioning if he had been as stubborn before the divorce. He admitted he had not been anywhere near as stubborn. 5 years later, Angela and Jenny sat in the front row of the funeral home's memorial room. It was a large turnout for Steve Johnson's wake and funeral procession. Steve died of pancreatic cancer 4 weeks after he walked Jenny down the aisle at her wedding. He had a few new friends and colleagues who appeared, but he did not regain a large network of friends after the divorce. Most of his old friends, neighbors, and colleagues came to pay their respects to a good man they knew and had lost touch with over the years. His girlfriend Marianne was there. They never got married. She tried very hard not to spit on Angela for the pain she caused her man. His best friend, Lou DeMarco, regaled Jenny with stories about the last years of her father's life. He filled her heart with stories she would never have known. Marianne was the one who ultimately persuaded him to heed Jenny's words and reconcile when he received a terminal diagnosis. For years he had discarded letters, deleted emails, and ignored calls from Jenny. Their reunion was impeccably timed, knowing these were his final months. Jenny rescheduled her wedding day, incurring substantial costs due to increased fees for urgent arrangements, to fulfill her deepest wish, her father giving her away. Their tearful reunion and walk down the aisle granted Steve one last peace of mind before succumbing to his final battle. His last words expressed gratitude to Marianne for reuniting him with Jenny and an apology for never marrying her. She understood and never pressured him into marriage. They were already content. Marianne conveyed to Jenny how he always missed her and regretted not contacting her years ago. When her mother inquired, Jenny shared moments of their reconciliation, stating, "He attended my graduation, discreetly in the back rows. Marianne was with him. He followed my career, proud of my achievements as a detective in Streamwood. Clippings from the Herald adorned his walls. He cherished your accomplishments, calling you a crime scene expert." Marianne confirmed, "He said it was because of all that stuff. When you were little, you all watched Columbo and criminologist shows together. He hoped you would make it to Chicago or some other big city and have more important things to do." Jenny smiled through most of the wake, listening to stories about her father's life post-divorce. She was pleased to finally meet Marianne, with whom she still spoke from time to time. His new life seemed as good as it could be, and he died a contented man. After the funeral, she said her last prayer, thanking God that he had finally found peace. Angela attempted to reconnect with Jenny during the wake and funeral, but ruined everything at the after-service lunch with an ill-timed comment. Alone after everyone left, Angela remarked, "Jenny, I finally found peace." Shocked, Jenny responded, "What are you talking about, Mom? I've avoided relationships for years, fearing Dad would damage them. He was acquitted by the police." Enraged, Jenny declared, "You worthless cow! Now you're happy he's gone so you can have fun. I had hoped you changed, but now I hope you rot in hell." Angela winced, attempting to explain, but Jenny cut her off, saying, "The next time I see you, Mom, is when we get your fat back in the ground." Despite Angela's pleas, Jenny concluded, "Goodbye, Mom. Good luck in your bed life." This marked the final exchange between mother and daughter. 10 months later, Angela and her boyfriend, Charlie Harlan, had dinner at an upscale steakhouse. Charlie expressed his appreciation for the wonderful 8 months they had spent together. Angela squeezed his hand and reciprocated his sentiments, expressing her initial uncertainty about finding love again, but feeling fortunate to have found each other. Charlie then confessed his love for Angela and proposed marriage. Angela took a deep breath and accepted his proposal. At that moment, she thought to herself that he was dead, and she had nothing to worry about. A week later, Charlie sat on his back porch contemplating his impending wedding, and Angela moving in with him. He drew deeply from his Cuban Monte Cristo No. 2 cigar and exhaled the smoke. As he sighed contentedly, a weapon was pressed to his temple, and the trigger was pulled. A pistol was put in his hand, a cigar was set in an ashtray, and a note was left under a heavy ashtray on the table. "The price has been paid in full." Angela ended the call with Detective Jordan, her face wet with tears. After the emotional conversation, she went to the bathroom, grabbed a bottle of sleeping pills. Though she didn't need it for a while, she always kept it handy, walked to her mailbox, placed an envelope in it, and raised the flag for outgoing mail. Lying on the bed, she reflected on her wedding to Steve, the beautiful day it had been, her pride in Jenny's career, family vacations, and park trips. She regretted never meeting Martin Schindler and ruining her own life. Finally, she prayed to see Steve soon. Placing the note on her chest, she fell asleep for the last time. Her note read, "My price has been paid in full." Jenny arrived home with mail and a bag of groceries. She restored everything to its place, hung her keys on the hook, and kicked off her shoes. Blake, her husband, wouldn't be home until nearly midnight due to his second shift as a cop. To savor the quiet of the house, she uncorked a bottle of California Cabernet and poured a full glass. After a sip, she approached the stack of mail and noticed a letter. Shocked, she screamed upon reading the sender's name, Angela Johnson. Tearing it open, she read her mother's final message, realizing the true meaning behind her mother's self-destruction. "Wow, Mom, wow," she uttered to the empty house. She dialed Jordan on her mobile phone. "Detective Jordan, it's Jenny Stanger, daughter of Steve and Angela Johnson." "Hello, young lady. Sorry to hear about your mother's self-destruction. Thank you. At least you don't have to investigate. Yes, what can I do for you, Jenny? I got a letter from my mother, a confession. What? He shouted into the phone. A confession of all self-destructions that were actually slaughters. Clearly she was crazy. I can't believe this. Jesus Christ. Okay, come and meet me at my site as soon as you can. She burned the first page in the fireplace, ensuring it was completely incinerated. The letter conveyed, "My dear Jenny, I offer you this last gift of my repentance. Whether you believe it or not, I love you with all my heart and apologize for all the pain I caused you. It wasn't intentional. Damaging you and your father was the worst thing I've ever done. I knew it had to be you when Charlie was eliminated. I accept my punishment and apologize for making you punish me. I hope you can now live without the pain of my betrayal. Destroy this page and give page 2 to the police. Page 2 is my full confession. I take responsibility for everything. It's all my fault. I can never bring back your lost years, but I pray for your forgiveness and peace. Please share stories of good times with my future grandchildren, not tales of how I ruined our lives. I pray for your long and happy marriage with Blake. Don't be tempted away when someone tries to lure you. I love you wholeheartedly, Mother. P.S. Kindly seek assistance from someone and obtain the help you urgently require." The weary note carried the weight of expense. Jenny, upon receiving this, I will have already taken my own life. I can no longer bear the burden of guilt. I ended the lives of these men, my lovers. They paid a price for taking me from your father. I always belonged to him. Perhaps now I can reunite with him. May the Lord forgive me. My love for you is eternal. I apologize for ruining our life before Martin. We once had an ideal family. Mother. Jenny approached Detective Jordan's desk and exchanged greetings before settling into the chair he offered. As Detective Jordan read the letter, he expressed his regret to Jenny for suspecting her. Jenny agreed, expressing disbelief at her mother's actions and speculating that her mother might have lost her sanity years ago. She couldn't comprehend her mother's motive for dating men just to damage them, and found it difficult to understand. Jenny noted that it somewhat made sense that her mother was responsible for some slaughters, considering her whereabouts couldn't be confirmed at the crime scenes and the lack of substantial evidence. She mentioned that she had always thought it could have been her father or Schindler's ex-wife, but their alibis couldn't be disproved either. Jenny expressed relief that it was all over. The slaughters, her mother's pain, and her own suffering, and bid farewell to Detective Jordan. Exiting the police station, Jenny wore a wide smile and shook her head. She paused, opened the car door, gazed at the sky, and expressed, "Thank you, Mom.